The night begins with the sound of dripping. Not rain, something slower, heavier, falling from the beams of a tenement ceiling above my cot. The air is foul, thick with the sour smell of unwashed bodies and damp brick that never truly dries. Lantern light wavers along the corridor, catching the outline of a rat slipping beneath a broken door. Somewhere in the room beside me, a man coughs a wet, tearing sound that echoes through the boards like a warning. Fever has settled into this place, quiet at first, then everywhere at once. I wrap my coat tighter, though it does nothing against the cold crawling beneath the fabric. Outside the window, the slum streets breathe their own kind of darkness, narrow alleys where shadows move, and whispers carry talk of new sickness, new deaths, new families packing what little they own into bundles before the inspectors arrive. If you're listening to this with the lights low, subscribe and stay with me in these slums. Every doorway hides a story. Every alley breathes a memory of disease and survival. Walk with me through these forgotten streets and listen to the echoes that never healed. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? The past is never as distant as it seems, because this story begins long before tonight's dripping ceiling. It begins in the heart of Victorian London's forgotten neighborhoods, places where overcrowding, hunger, and neglect became the perfect soil for typhus, trench fever, and other killers to root themselves deep into everyday life. As I stand here in the dim light, breathing the same air they once breathed, you can almost feel how quickly a single cough could turn an entire street into a graveyard. The first sound is always the drip, slow, deliberate, almost thoughtful, as if the ceiling above is deciding exactly where to let the next bead fall. I lie beneath it in the half-dark, staring up at the swollen boards that sagged like tired lungs, each one stained with the quiet history of nights spent fighting off fever, mold, and the weight of too many footsteps overhead. The air is heavy with damp, thick enough to taste. Every breath carries the scent of rot baked into the wood, a smell that never quite leaves your clothes no matter how long you stand outside in the wind. Down here, mornings begin before you open your eyes. The slum wakes you long before you're ready. The drip lands in a tin bowl I keep just beside my cot, a soft metallic ping that echoes more loudly than it should in these close walls. Sometimes, especially in winter, I swear the rhythm of it matches the heartbeat of the house itself. Above me, water creeps through the roof tiles, through layers of crumbling plaster, through the boards that once belonged to someone else's floor. It carries with it whatever stories linger in the rooms above: spilled broth, washed linen, a child's tears, a sick man's sweat. The ceiling is a living thing, always leaking its secrets into the room below. And I lie here, listening, knowing that the drip means another day has begun in the deadliest corner of the city. I swing my legs over the side of the cot, feet sinking into a floor that never fully dries. The boards feel cold and swollen beneath my heels, and the damp crawls up my legs faster than the warmth of sleep can fade. Outside my small window, dawn has not yet reached the alley. Fog clings stubbornly to the brick, pooling in corners where even the sun refuses to go. A rat darts along the wall, its claws clicking softly, pausing only to sniff at the gap beneath my door, a reminder that everything in these slums shares space, breath, and hunger. Somewhere above, a woman coughs. The sound is sharp, wet, the kind that travels through walls as if illness carries its own echo. When I lift the bowl from beneath the drip, it sloshes with the night's collection. The water is cloudy, flecked with plaster and dust, a small universe of everything overhead. I empty it out the window, watching it vanish into the gutter that runs like an open wound along the street. The slums have a way of taking what they want back into themselves. Nothing stays clean for long. Nothing stays untouched. Not the walls, not the water, not the people. I stand there for a moment, listening to the house settle the creak of swollen beams, the shuffle of someone waking on the floor above, the faint shifting of lice beneath a collar hung too close to mine. It's a strange thing, knowing that the first drip of the morning carries more than water, it carries warning. It carries the memory of every fever that has passed through this building, every trembling hand that clutched the sheets, every body carried out before dawn. And as another bead gathers overhead, trembling on the edge of falling, I realize it. The slum never truly sleeps. It only waits. And the dripping ceiling always knows when the next illness is coming. The alley breathes before I do. A long, slow exhale of cold air slipping through the cracks beneath my door, carrying with it the smell of everything the city tries to forget. When I step outside, the world narrows immediately, brick pressing in on both sides. Walls so close together they seem to lean toward one another as if conspiring. The sky is only a thin blade of dull grey far overhead, and even that feels borrowed. Sunlight has never touched this place. It is too narrow, too damp, too unwanted. The slum keeps its secrets in shadow, and the alley keeps them longest. The ground beneath my boots is slick with the remains of last night's rain, or perhaps last week's water here doesn't flow, it waits. Puddles stretch like bruises across the stone, reflecting only the dim glow of the gas lamps that flicker weakly at either end. Rats move confidently along the edges, their fur slick, their bodies swollen from scavenging what little food reaches these depths. They belong here more than people do. At least they thrive in the dark. A woman pushes past me, shawl pulled tight, eyes hollow. She doesn't speak, doesn't look up, only walks with the weary precision of someone who has learned to avoid the worst patches of mud without needing to see them. Behind her, a door creaks open, and a man empties a bucket of foul water directly into the alley. It splashes across the stones, picking up soot, ash, and threads of straw as it spreads, eventually joining the stagnant puddles that never fully evaporate. The smell rises instantly, sour, heavy, layered with the unmistakable note of sickness. If you are unlucky enough to live here, you learn quickly that the alley is alive. It listens. It remembers. It carries whispers the way other streets carry wind. Voices drift from the upper windows, arguments muffled by damp curtains. Babies crying for milk there is no money to buy. The relentless cough of someone who will not live through the week. Their sounds fall downward, absorbed into the brick, carried through the dark like warnings. As I walk deeper in, the chill thickens. This corner of London traps cold the way a cellar traps mold. Even in the height of summer, the walls drip with moisture, as if sweating out the fever of those who have passed through. On mornings like this, when the air is sharp and still, the alley holds the breath of the night just a little longer. Trench fever is said to spread in places like this, carried by the lice that move from coat to coat in cramped rooms, by bodies pressed too close in the dark. And typhus? It thrives here. It hides inside the damp timber, the unwashed blankets, the very air. Two children huddle near a broken crate, their faces pale beneath the grime. They watch me with wary eyes, clutching each other against the cold. One scratches at the back of his neck, slow, persistent, the scratch of someone who knows the bite of lice by heart. Their mother is nowhere in sight. She might be working, or ill, or gone. In alleys like this, the difference between the three often blurs. Further down, laundry hangs between windows like surrender flags, heavy shirts, threadbare trousers, dresses patched so many times the original cloth is a memory. None of it is clean, not truly. Washing clothes in water drawn from shared pumps does little more than rearrange the dirt. But still, they hang the garments out, hoping that air, even air this stale, might do what soap cannot. The alley bends slightly at the far end, disappearing around a corner few people bother to take. Past that bend lies an even narrower stretch, one so tight you cannot walk without your shoulders brushing the walls. They say sunlight never reached that place. Not once. Not in all the years these buildings have stood. Not even at noon in midsummer. It is there that fever usually begins, a single man collapsing against the wall, or a mother slumping over the wash basin. By the time the sickness reaches the wider parts of the slum, it is already too late. As I stand at the mouth of that shadowed turn, I feel the alley watching. It knows me. It knows all of us who live here. And in its cold, damp silence, it holds the truth that no one wants to hear. Disease is not the visitor in this place we are. The fever belongs to the alley far more deeply than any human ever will. The mattress sags beneath me like a lung that long ago forgot how to fill. It is thin, lumpy, and stained with the ghosts of too many nights, each one soaked in fever, sweat, and the restless twisting of bodies trying to outlast the cold. In the slums, a bed is not a place of rest. It is a relic passed between hands, between tenants, between the living and the dying. It remembers everyone who ever lay upon it, and it holds their warmth long after they're gone. The bed never cools, not truly. It carries the heat of every fever that has burned through the room, and sometimes, in the stillness before dawn, you can feel it pulse beneath your spine like something alive. I sit at the edge and run my hand over the coarse fabric. The cloth scratches the skin, stiff from years without proper washing. Whatever stuffing remains inside shifts unevenly, clumping toward the sagging center where the weight of countless bodies has pressed it down. There are faint, dark rings along the sides, the outlines of spilt broth, spilled blood, spilled life. A few strands of hair, not mine, cling stubbornly to the seams. You can't scrub a mattress like this clean. Even if you could, the water needed would cost more than a week's rent, and the landlord would only charge you double for the damage. In the corner, a young couple sleeps huddled beneath a single blanket patched together with scraps of cloth. Their breaths rise and fall in uneven rhythm, sometimes hitching into coughs that shake the frame of their shared cot. They don't wake anymore when the coughing starts. It happens too often. Their child lies curled between them, a small bundle of bones with a ribbon of sweat glistening at his hairline. He sleeps fitfully, limbs twitching as if running from something even in dreams. Every morning, his mother presses her hand to his forehead, whispering prayers she no longer believes in. Every morning, she decides not to call the doctor, because the doctor means debt, and debt here is a doorway no one returns from. When they rise, they will leave behind the warmth of their bodies, warmth the mattress eagerly absorbs. I've seen it happen hundreds of times. A man steps out into the street wearing the last of his strength. The bed behind him still radiates heat, the imprint of his shape holding firm in the sagging straw. Hours later, when his wife collapses onto that same spot, the ghost of his warmth clings to her spine. It's as if the slums themselves refuse to let go of the living, holding their last traces long after the world has taken everything else. Sometimes, when a tenant dies quietly, softly, with only the drip from the ceiling marking the passing hours, it takes days before the landlord comes to collect the body. In that time, the bed grows hotter and hotter beneath the weight of fever and stillness. When the body is finally lifted away, the heat remains. Not from life, but from something deeper, something that lingers. The next person who sleeps there feels it immediately. They turn, restless, tugging the blanket this way and that as the phantom warmth settles beneath their ribs. The slums call it the death heat, a sign that the bed is not finished holding on to the memory of the one who came before. A girl I knew once told me that if you lie very still in the darkest part of night, the mattress hums. I didn't believe her, not then. But on nights when fever grips half the building, when the walls are alive with coughing and the air vibrates with the low moans of suffering, I can almost sense it. A faint tremor beneath my shoulder, a soft stirring under the spine, as if the mattress is breathing in the sickness and breathing it back out. I stretch my legs, pulling the threadbare blanket over my chest, though it does little against the cold. The warmth beneath me is from someone else, someone who slept here before the landlord knocked on their door and the world carried them away. I wonder who they were. whether they survived their fever, whether they ever had a night in which their body rested without trembling. But the bed knows. It keeps every story in its worn fibers, every heartbeat, every cough, every final breath. And as I lie back against the familiar sag, the faintest whisper of lingering warmth curls around my spine. In this place, the bed never cools, because fever never leaves. It begins quietly, almost gently, the way the worst things often do. A child sits on the edge of her mother's cot, bare feet dangling above the warped floorboards, her hair falling in tangled strands across her forehead. At first glance, she could be cold, the slums are full of drafts, and the morning fog slips through every crack like a living thing. But the air in the room is heavy tonight, warm from the bodies packed inside. There is no reason for her to be trembling, and yet she does. A tiny shiver runs up her spine, barely enough to shake her shoulders, but enough for her mother to notice, enough for her mother's breath to catch in her throat. The girl tries to hide it. Children here learn early not to draw attention, not to worry the adults who work too hard and sleep too little. But she can't control the trembling. It comes again, a flutter beneath the skin, like a bird trapped in her chest trying to escape. Her lips press together tightly, but a faint, involuntary chattering betrays her. Her mother steps closer, brushing the child's cheek with the back of her hand. The touch lingers, searching, measuring, and in that moment, something inside her sinks. The heat radiating from her daughter's skin is not the warmth of a shared blanket or a summer night. It is the dry, furious heat of a rising fever. Her mother glances towards the window, where the alley waits just outside in its never-ending damp. There is no breeze tonight, no relief in the air, only the low hum of sickness that seems to cling to the brick itself. A man coughs in the next room, a long, ragged sound that ends in a wet gasp. Downstairs, someone vomits into a bucket, the splash echoing up the stairwell. The building is full of these noises now, each one a reminder that something is spreading, something invisible and merciless. And now it has reached her child. The girl swallows hard, her throat bobbing as she tries to speak. "I'm fine," she whispers, though the word breaks apart on her tongue. She hugs her arms around her chest, fingertips digging into her skin as if she can hold herself together by force. But another shiver rips through her, stronger this time, shaking her thin frame. Her mother pulls a blanket around her shoulders, though the girl flinches, not from the cold, but from the sudden rush of heat beneath the wool. Fever doesn't comfort, it burns. On the floor beside the cot, the family keeps a small bowl of water drawn from the shared pump at the end of the street. It is cloudy, already tinged with grime, but they have nothing cleaner. Her mother dips a cloth into it, wrings it out, and presses it to the girl's forehead. The child gasps softly at the touch, the shock of coolness meeting a fire blooming beneath her skin. For a moment, the trembling stops, but only for a moment. The next breath she takes shudders, as if her lungs are resisting the air itself. Her father returns home late, boots muddy, shoulders slumped, the weight of another hopeless day settling across his back. When he sees the child wrapped in blankets, her face flushed and eyes glassy, he stops in the doorway as though struck. He is a strong man, a man used to hard work and harder nights, but fear shadows his expression now. He knows what fever in the slums can become. He has seen it take neighbors, friends, entire rooms of people in a matter of days. He steps forward slowly, his hands uncertain, hovering above the girl's brow before he finally touches her. Her skin is scorching. The parents exchange a look wordless, heavy, the kind that carries whole conversations in silence. The mother shakes her head slightly. They have no money for a doctor. Even if they did, the doctors rarely come here unless someone has already died. The hospitals are full, and the charity clinics are crowded with bodies slumped against the walls, waiting to be seen, waiting to be saved, waiting to be claimed by something too strong to fight. The girl curls inward, her breaths coming in quick, shallow waves. Sweat gathers at her temples, sliding down to her jaw. She whispers again that she's fine, but the words no longer mean anything. The first shiver has come and gone. The fever is here now, blooming inside her like a fire no one can put out. Outside, the alley shifts in the darkness, carrying the distant sound of another cough, another cry, another life slipping toward the edge. And in this small room with its dripping ceiling and sagging walls, a mother holds her trembling child and realizes the truth every family here eventually learns. In the Victorian slums, the first shiver is never just a shiver. It is the beginning. The chemist's shop sits at the bend of the street where the alley widens just enough for a cart to turn. Its windows are always fogged, smeared with the grime of countless fingers pressing for a glimpse inside. By daylight, the place looks abandoned, a narrow storefront with peeling paint, a warped sign hanging by a single nail, and bottles arranged haphazardly behind the glass like prisoners waiting for release. But at night, when the slums shift into their true shape, the chemist's door becomes one of the busiest thresholds in the neighborhood. Desperation has a way of drawing crowds. I approach it slowly, boots crunching on the broken gravel outside. A faint glow radiates from within, the weak light of a single candle burning low on the counter. The flame wavers with every gust that pushes through the cracks of the doorframe. It smells of alcohol, acrid and sharp, mixed with the sweetness of powdered herbs and something bitter, a scent that sticks to the back of the throat. When I step closer, I can hear movement inside, the soft clink of glass, the rustle of paper parcels, the low hum of someone muttering to themselves. The chemist is a man of indeterminate age. Some say he's 40, others swear he must be past 60. His hair hangs limp around his face, streaked with grey, and his hands tremble slightly when he measures powders onto a scrap of torn parchment. He doesn't wear an apron like respectable apothecaries upriver. Instead, he keeps himself wrapped in a patched coat, buttoned up to the neck, even in summer, as though he fears something might escape from beneath his skin. People visit him for many reasons, none of them noble. Mothers come for syrups, to quiet a child's cough long enough for sleep. Laborers come for liniments to numb the ache of their joints before returning to the factories at dawn. And then there are the others, those who linger in the doorway with hollow eyes and trembling fingers, waiting for bottles filled with something stronger. Laudanum, ether, tinctures laced with opium, anything to soften the edges of misery. But the most sought-after remedies tonight are the fever powders, cheap mixtures of quinine, ground willow bark, and whatever filler the chemist uses to stretch his supplies. They offer no cure, only the illusion of relief. Still, illusions sell well here. As I step inside, a woman stands at the counter, her shoulders hunched, her shawl wrapped tight around her frame. Her son waits beside her, leaning heavily on her arm. His eyes are glazed, his face slick with sweat, his breath shallow. The chemist glances at them briefly, his expression unreadable, before turning to sift powder into a paper twist. He works with practiced motions, fold, crease, tie with string, as if assembling the child's last hope were no different than preparing tea. When the mother reaches for her purse, the chemist's voice cuts through the silence. "That'll be 4 pence, he mutters, not unkindly, but without emotion. The price is steep, nearly half a week's food, yet she pays without hesitation. What is money against the fear of losing a child? She leaves quickly, guiding the boy into the night where he shivers beneath her touch. The moment the door shuts, another customer slips inside, an older man with a wheeze deep in his chest. He coughs into a rag, the sound rattling through the shop like something breaking apart. I wait my turn. The chemist does not greet me. He only lifts his eyes briefly, his gaze flickering with recognition before returning to the scales. "Another fever in your building?" he asks, as if commenting on the weather. "Yes," I answer. "A little girl." He nods once, without sympathy. He has seen too many die to flinch at the mention of another. The powder may ease her shivering, he says, as he measures out a dull grey mixture. But it won't stop the fever. Not this kind. What kind is it? I ask. He pauses just for a breath. Typhus, most likely. Or trench fever. Hard to say. The slums don't get neat answers. When he hands me the packet, I feel the heat from his fingertips. A reminder that even here, surrounded by sickness, life clings stubbornly to the skin. I pay him, though the coins feel heavy in my pocket, and step back into the night. The chemist's door closes behind me with a tired sigh, as though the building itself resents how often it must open. In the alley, fog curls around my boots, and the distant sound of coughing rises again, a chorus the slums know too well. The medicine in my hand weighs almost nothing, but the hope it is meant to carry feels unbearably heavy. Morning creeps through the slums not with sunlight, but with sound. Doors groan open, footsteps shuffle across swollen boards, and a chorus of coughing rises through the thin walls like a tide no one can stop. In the narrow hallway outside my room, the air tastes of stale breath and damp wool. People move with sluggish determination, too tired to hurry and too hungry to rest. It is in this limping procession that the handkerchief makes its rounds, a small square of cloth that carries more than any of us care to admit. It begins with old Mrs. Kettle, the widow who lives 3 doors down. She is always the first to wake, her joints stiff, her lungs rattling like stones in a bucket. She keeps a checked handkerchief tucked into her sleeve, a reminder of a time before she lost her husband, her sons, her savings a scrap of a former life. This morning, as she leans over the stair rail to steady herself, a wet cough tears through her chest. She presses the cloth to her mouth, coughing until her shoulders shake and her eyes glisten with tears. When she finally pulls the fabric away, the handkerchief is darker than it was moments before. She doesn't wash it. She doesn't have the means. Instead, she folds it neatly and tucks it back into her sleeve. Soon after, she steps into the hallway and nearly collides with her neighbor, Mr. Hanley, a thin, stooped man with a beard as grey and tangled as a chimney brush. He apologizes quickly, coughing into his fist. She pats his arm gently, offering him the handkerchief with a look that says, "Go on, you need it more than I do." And despite knowing better, despite understanding how sickness travels, he accepts it with gratitude. That is how things spread here. Through kindness, through need, through desperation disguised as generosity. As Mr. Hanley descends the stairs, he uses the cloth every few steps, dabbing at his lips, wiping the sweat from his brow. By the time he emerges into the courtyard, the handkerchief is damp with the residue of fever, breath, and something deeper, the quiet, lingering signature of illness. Children play near the water pump, kicking a rag-stuffed ball, their laughter thin and brittle in the morning air. When Mr. Hanley kneels to catch his breath, one of the boys rushes to his side, offering to help him stand. The boy's name is Arthur. He cannot be more than 7. When Mr. Hanley rises, breathing hard, Arthur notices the cloth in his hand. "Your nose is bleeding," the child says, pointing with concern. Mr. Hanley forces a smile and hands him the handkerchief to hold while he adjusts his coat. Arthur takes it without hesitation because he is a child, because he has seen adults do this 100 times, because no one has ever taught him the dangers of shared cloth. For a moment, Arthur examines the fabric. He wipes his own runny nose with it, then folds it clumsily the way he has watched adults do. When Mr. Hanley straightens, Arthur hands the cloth back proudly, as if he has done something kind. The man accepts it, unaware that in that brief exchange, the handkerchief has passed the whole weight of a disease from one person to another. Across the courtyard, Arthur's sister, Maggie, calls him inside for breakfast, a thin broth stretched from yesterday's scraps. He runs to her, brushing his hands against his trousers, but the damage is already done. Maggie touches his face, kisses the top of his head, and together they disappear into their dark, cramped room where their mother lies dozing with a fever of her own. By midday, the handkerchief has made its way through 3 more residents. Someone uses it to wipe dust from a child's cheek. Someone else borrows it to catch a sneeze. Another ties it around their mouth while sweeping the hallway to keep from breathing the dust that never truly settles. By evening, the cloth will return to Mrs. Kettle's sleeve, warmed by a dozen hands, marked by a dozen breaths. By dawn, someone in the building will begin to shiver. And by the end of the week, the handkerchief, that simple, folded square passed between neighbors, will have carried trench fever, typhus, or something equally cruel through every room of the slum. Sometimes death moves quietly. Sometimes it is nothing more than cloth shared out of habit. At the end of the street, where the alley widens into a crooked courtyard, the neighborhood pump stands like a tired sentinel. Its iron handle is worn smooth by thousands of hands, its spout stained with rust and mineral residue from years of unclean water passing through. In the slums, water is life, but it is also danger, a quiet danger that hides beneath the surface, tasting of metal, earth, and the whispers of sickness no one can see. Every dawn, long before the factories whistle their summons, the residents gather with pails, buckets, cracked jugs, and whatever containers they can manage. The pump is the first ritual of the day. When I arrive, the queue has already formed. Mothers wrapped in shawls, boys rubbing sleep from their eyes, old men leaning on canes while their thin chests tremble with each breath. The smell of damp brick mixes with the sharp tang of cold iron. People speak in murmurs, too weary for conversation, yet bound together by the simple necessity of this line. Everyone here knows that the pump water is not clean. Everyone knows it carries the filth of the street, the rot beneath the ground, and the runoff from the overflowing cesspits that seep into the soil. But there is no alternative. Boiling costs coal. Clean deliveries cost money. The river is worse. A little girl, no more than 5, struggles to lift her family's dented tin pail. She can barely hold it upright as she waits her turn. Her mother is behind her, coughing into her elbow, trying to hide the blood already staining the inside of her sleeve. The girl glances back at her, eyes wide with worry, but steps forward when the next person moves. The pump groans loudly as a man heaves down on the handle, water sputtering from the spout in intermittent gushes. A thin stream splashes into his bucket, swirling with particles that catch the morning light like drifting dust. When it is the little girl's turn, she braces the pail beneath the pump. The handle is too heavy for her, so an older boy steps forward and helps, pumping with practiced rhythm. The spout coughs out water that runs down the sides of the pail and onto her shoes, soaking into the already damp hem of her dress. She doesn't flinch. She has done this countless times. She watches the water rise with the solemnity of someone far older, as if understanding the weight this pail will carry back to her room not just for drinking, but for washing, cooking, cooling fevers, and wiping sweat from sick brows. When the pail is full, she lifts it with both hands, arms trembling. The boy offers to help her carry it, but she shakes her head. Pride is a fragile, necessary thing in a place where nearly everything else is lacking. She drags the pail up the steps, each movement slow and deliberate. By the time she reaches her door, her arms are shaking badly. Inside, her mother takes the pail with a grateful nod, though even lifting it makes her wince. Just behind me, a middle-aged man with sunken cheeks approaches the pump next. He carries a wooden bucket patched with tar. He sets it beneath the spout, and when the water hits the bottom, he cups his hand and drinks directly from it. The crowd looks away. No one scolds him, no one warns him. Hunger and thirst carve desperation into a person long before illness does. When he wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, lice shift beneath his collar. He doesn't seem to notice. As the line moves forward, the pump groans louder. The metal trembles with each push, as though straining under the burden of the entire slum. The more water poured into pails, the more sickness it carries back into rooms where fevers already bloom. But no one questions it. This is simply the way it is, the way it has always been. When my turn comes, I set my bucket beneath the spout and wrap both hands around the handle. The pump jerks, resists, then gives way with a shudder. The water that emerges is cold, cloudy, and heavy with the taste of earth. It splashes into the bucket, swirling with flecks of silt that settle slowly at the bottom. I watch it fill, knowing what it contains, yet knowing I will drink it anyway. We all will. Behind me, the line stretches into the alley, a slow-moving serpent of hunger, exhaustion, and quiet hope. Every family waits for their turn, balancing the weight of their containers, unaware of how many lives the pump has claimed over the years. In places like this, death does not arrive with violence. It drips from ceilings. It lingers on cloth. It waits in the water pail at the corner pump. The morning passes slowly, settling into the slums like a fog that refuses to lift. By midday, the heat trapped between the buildings grows thick enough to make sweat cling to the skin and cloth stick to the back of the neck. It is in this suffocating warmth that the true inhabitants of the slums reveal themselves tiny, persistent, almost invisible. You don't feel them at first, not until it's too late. A faint tickle beneath the shirt collar, a light scratch behind the ear, a subtle movement crawling along the seam of a coat, then another, and another. The lice have arrived. Most people here don't notice right away. Hunger dulls the senses, and exhaustion numbs what remains. But every now and then, as I walk through the narrow corridor, I see it the unmistakable gesture, a quick hand rising to the nape of the neck, fingers rubbing just once, a restless shrug of the shoulders, a short, irritated scratch. These are not the eager motions of someone dealing with a momentary itch. They are the defeated, resigned habits of those who know their clothing has become a home for something else. Children are the first to show it. Their hair is rarely washed, their clothes tugged over their heads day after day without change. A girl sits on the front step, braiding her sister's hair, humming softly. Every few seconds, the younger child flinches, and the older one pauses to scratch her scalp absent-mindedly before continuing. They don't think twice about it. It's simply part of life, just as normal as the rats skittering through the alley or the dripping ceilings overhead. But lice do more than irritate in these cramped streets. They carry sickness like messengers. Trench fever hides in their bodies, waiting for the chance to spread through a scratch, a bite, a broken patch of skin. It moves quietly, choosing no favorites. Children, mothers, factory workers, all are equal in the eyes of these tiny parasites. I see Mr. Whitby standing by the doorway of his flat, adjusting the collar of his worn coat. He is a proud man, once a clerk, now a worker at the docks, since illness cost him his position. His hands tremble slightly as he tugs at the fabric near his neck. He scratches once, twice, then presses his fingers hard against the spot, as if trying to crush whatever lurks beneath. He glances around, embarrassed, before lowering his hand. In the slums, shame spreads just as quickly as sickness. Inside, in the dim room he shares with his wife and 2 sons, he removes his coat and hangs it on a nail by the door. As it settles against the wall, a tiny movement ripples along the inside of the collar. A louse crawls out, pauses, then disappears beneath the fabric again. His youngest son reaches for the coat, curious, but his mother pulls him away, brushing stray hair from his forehead. Her fingers linger there for a moment, feeling warmth she hopes is only due to the crowded room and not something more dangerous. On the landing, a group of women gather to speak in hushed tones about the fever on the 2nd floor. They lean close to hear one another, faces only inches apart. As one woman complains of itching beneath her arms, her neighbor reaches out without hesitation and adjusts her shawl for her. The gesture is kind, but it is also how sickness spreads. Hands brushing cloth, cloth touching skin, skin carrying illness from one body to the next. Throughout the day, people bathe where they can, basins filled with pump water, rags dipped and wrung out again and again. But water alone cannot wash these creatures away. Clothes need boiling. Linen needs burning. And no one here has the means for either. Near evening, as the lamps are lit and the air grows thick with smoke from kitchen stoves, I watch a boy crouched in the courtyard, pulling at the seams of his shirt. He scratches until his skin reddens. Then he gives up and sits still, teeth clenched, trying not to cry. His mother calls him inside. He rises slowly, dragging his feet. The moment he steps through the doorway, he presses his hand to his neck again. Defeated. The lice are patient. They thrive in warmth. They move in the dark. And every hour they remain unseen. The fever they carry threads itself deeper into the slum. Here, beneath the collar, is the first quiet battlefield. One scratch becomes a wound. One louse becomes 100. And one fever becomes an epidemic. By late afternoon, the slums begin to sweat. Heat gathers in the brick like a trapped breath, clinging to every wall and floorboard. The tenement houses swell with the pressure of too many bodies crowded into too little space. The air inside thickens heavy, stale, soured by fever breath and kitchen smoke. And in the middle of it all, the building relies on one narrow vent to exhale what it cannot hold. The vent runs upward from the center corridor, a rusted iron grate set high in the wall. Its edges are chipped, its bars bent outward like crooked teeth. When you stand beneath it, you can feel a faint draft, no stronger than the exhale of a sleeping child. Yet in these slums, that thin thread of circulating air is all that stands between survival and suffocation. A line forms beneath it every evening, gathering slowly as families return from the day's labor. People press their backs to the wall, faces tilted upward, hoping for a breath of relief. But the vent has never been generous. What escapes it is not fresh air, but a mixture of heat, dampness, and the lingering smell of illness rising from the rooms above. Mrs. Calder is the first to take her place beneath it tonight. Her cheeks are hollow, her eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights spent tending to her sick husband. She lifts her hair off her neck, letting the vent's weak breeze cool the sweat clinging to her scalp. When the air shifts, carrying the faint sourness of fever, she flinches but does not move away. Even foul air feels like respite compared to the suffocating heat inside her room. Next comes the Cooper boy, no older than 10, still wearing his factory cap. His face is grey with exhaustion. He leans against the wall, breathing slowly, as if mastering the rhythm required to stay upright. His shirt collar is frayed, the fabric darkened where sweat has soaked through. When he scratches absently at the back of his neck, lice scatter unseen beneath the cloth. He sighs as the air from the vent brushes over him. It's barely noticeable, but here, barely is enough. Inside the building, the vent carries every sound upward. A man somewhere on the top floor groans the long, low sound of someone losing a battle. A child coughs, then coughs again, the noise sharp enough to echo down the shaft. Each sound enters the vent like a secret, traveling through the walls and out into the corridor where neighbors gather, listening without intending to. I step closer and place my hand against the metal grate. It is warm, too warm, as if the building itself has a fever. The heat radiating from it pulses faintly, almost like a heartbeat. Every so often, a wisp of air escapes, carrying the distinct scent of sweat-soaked linens that have not dried properly, of unwashed bodies sleeping too close together, of stale broth simmering on a stove that has gone cold. Behind me, footsteps approach. It is the groundsman, an older man with hands cracked and darkened from years of hauling coal and clearing refuse. He stops beside me, squints up at the vent, and shakes his head. "Should have been rebuilt years ago," he mutters. "But we patch it instead. We patch everything in this place, until it breaks again." He pushes at the grate. testing its strength. It rattles but holds. "If this vent fails," he says, voice low, "the rooms will choke." They already do, in truth. But this, he taps the metal gently, this is the only chance for air some of them have. As night settles in, the vent grows louder, carrying the restless breathing of dozens of people who try to sleep despite the heat pressing on their chests. The corridor fills again and again, mothers stepping out to escape the suffocating rooms, men pausing to cool their brows after long shifts, children seeking a moment of relief from the closeness of their beds. Every breath, every cough, every whisper rises through this narrow passage, layering itself inside the metal throat of the vent. And whatever the vent cannot carry upward sinks back down, settling into the rooms like dust. Sickness thrives in places like this, in still air, in unmoving heat, in vents too small for the lives they serve. By midnight, the slums feel like a furnace waiting to smother its inhabitants, and the vent, rusted and weary, exhales one final breath before falling silent for a moment too long. Inside the building, someone begins to shiver. It is the kind of shiver that does not come from cold, and the vent cannot carry it away. Night settles over the slums like a heavy shroud, pressing itself against windows, seeping through the cracks beneath warped doors, sinking into the lungs of everyone still awake. It is a quiet hour, the kind that makes every sound unnervingly clear, the creak of settling beams, the distant clatter of a cart passing at the street's end, the faint scratch of rats navigating the rafters. In that silence, even the smallest cry should carry. But tonight, the slum has chosen not to listen. At first, the cry is soft, a frightened whimper from the courtyard that blends into the hum of the night. No one turns their head. No one pauses their work. The slums are filled with these small sounds, and people have learned not to respond unless the noise is too urgent to ignore. But then, the cry rises again, sharper this time, trembling at the edges. A child's voice, thin and cracking, echoes between the narrow walls. A woman washing clothes in a basin hears it. She stops scrubbing for a moment, hands submerged in the cold, grey water. She tilts her head toward the window, listening. The cry comes again, desperate, lonely. She knows the sound. She's heard it many times before, from different mouths, in different seasons. She looks toward the door, but does not move. Her own daughter lies feverish in the next room, and she cannot leave her. Not for anything. On the top floor, old Mr. Grimes stirs in his sleep. His dreams are filled with the ghosts of ships, storms, and the distant rumble of cannons from the war he served in decades ago. The cry threads itself into his dream, merging with the memory of a boy he once tried to save. He wakes with a start, heart pounding. The room is dark. He hears the cry once more, muffled, trembling. He sits up, but his bones ache, and the fever in his joints burns. He lies back down. He tells himself, someone else will go. In the corridor, two factory men share a bottle of cheap gin, passing it between them as they slump against the peeling wallpaper. The slums have drained the color from their faces, leaving only grey beneath the grime. When the cry echoes through the hallway, they glance toward the stairwell. One shakes his head. Probably just a stray, he mutters. The other takes a long drink and lets the burn settle into his chest. Neither stands. Outside, in the cramped courtyard where puddles reflect the moonlight in broken fragments, a small boy stands barefoot in the cold. His breath fogs the air as he calls for his mother, his voice cracking with each plea. He is no more than 6, thin as a reed, his nightshirt soaked through with sweat and pump water. Behind him, the doorway to his room stands ajar, lamplight flickering inside. His mother lies on the bed unmoving, her skin pale beneath the fever that consumed her. The boy calls again. This time, the cry breaks into a sob. A neighbor hears it through the thin wall and presses her hands to her ears. She has lost enough already, a husband to influenza, a daughter to typhus, a newborn to hunger. She cannot bear the sound of one more grief she can do nothing about. Another neighbor, a man who has failed to find work for 3 weeks, steps to his window and peers down. He sees the child shivering in the courtyard. His stomach twists. For a moment, he considers going down. But the thought of carrying yet another body, of facing another mother gone cold, is more than he can bear. He closes the shutters gently, sealing himself off from the sight. The boy's cries weaken, turning into soft, hiccuping sobs. He wipes his face with the back of his hand, leaving streaks of dirt across his cheeks. The courtyard feels too big, too empty. He retreats into the doorway, calling one last time, barely above a whisper. "Mama?" The slum absorbs the word like breath, swallowing it into its damp walls. No footsteps descend the stairs. No voices answer his trembling call. No arms lift him into safety. Only the silence responds, heavy, suffocating, and absolute. In places like this, the first sign of death is not always a fever. Sometimes it is the cry that no one comes to hear. Fog drifts in from the river long after the city has gone quiet, settling over the slums in a pale, suffocating sheet. By the time midnight leans into the alleyways, the lamps burn low, their flames shrinking behind soot-darkened glass. It is at this hour, when the streets seem emptied of life, that the sanitary inspector finally arrives. His boots strike the cobblestones with a certain stiffness, the gait of a man who has walked these streets too many times and never grown used to them. Inspector Harrington holds a small lantern in one hand, its weak glow cutting only a narrow slice through the dense air. He pauses at the end of the court, inhaling deeply, though he immediately regrets it. The smell that fills his lungs is thick with rot, stagnant water, and the sour breath of too many bodies packed together without relief. He tightens his grip on the lantern. He has a list of houses to visit, names of families reported sick. He has done this work for 13 years, long enough to know that the list rarely captures everyone. But tonight, he hesitates. The slum is strangely quiet, too quiet. Even the rats move softly, their claws muted against the damp stone. Harrington's eyes shift along the row of contorted buildings leaning into each other as though sharing a long-held secret. Window shutters quiver in the faint breeze, and behind them he imagines faces thin, hollow, watching him pass without making a sound. He steps toward the first door, marked with a chalk X from his last visit. A fever house. 2 dead that week. 3 more ill. The home smells of sickness even from the outside, a heavy, cloying scent that seeps through the cracks around the frame. He reaches for the handle, then stops, lowering his lantern to the ground. His hand trembles, only slightly, but enough for him to tuck it into his coat pocket. He has seen too many men like himself fall to the very diseases they document. The sound of coughing rises from within the house, deep, rattling, the unmistakable sound of lungs filled with fluid. Harrington closes his eyes. He knows that cough. He knows what it means when it grows that low, when it drags like wet cloth across the ribs. Typhus, or trench fever, or something nameless that thrives in these walls. He knocks once, lightly. The sound echoes dully in the cramped space behind the door. No answer. He knocks again, louder this time. A shadow flickers in the window above. A child's face appears momentarily, pale in the lantern's glow, then disappears into the dark. Harrington waits. His breath fogs in the air. The alley holds its silence like a held breath. Finally, the door creaks open. A woman stands before him, hair loose around her shoulders, face hollow with worry and exhaustion. She does not greet him. She only steps aside and gestures to the darkness inside. "You should come quickly," she whispers. But he still hesitates. The lantern's glow spills into the front room, illuminating a cot where a man lies motionless beneath a damp sheet. His skin is waxen, his lips faintly blue. A young girl sits beside him, clutching his limp hand, tears glowing on her cheeks. The smell of fever in the room is overwhelming: heat, sweat, and the faint, metallic tang of sickness settling deep into the air. Harrington takes a step forward, then falters. He grips the doorframe until his knuckles whiten. A bead of sweat slides down his temple, though the night is cool. He has lost colleagues to nights like this. He has lost neighbors. He has lost family. One more step, he tells himself. But his body will not obey. Behind him, the alley stretches out, dark and unwelcoming. Ahead, the room waits, suffocating, feverish, alive with the quiet death that creeps through the slum each night. He knows his duty. He knows what is expected, but fear coils tight in his chest, rooting him to the floor. For the first time in 13 years, Inspector Harrington wonders if he is the next to fall. He lifts the lantern with a trembling hand and steps into the room. By dawn, the fog has thinned enough for the slums to take shape again, brick by brick, stain by stain, window by window. The smell of damp wood and night sweat still clings stubbornly to the air, but another scent rises with the morning, the sharp, sour odor of wet laundry left too long in the cold. It drifts from the corner of the courtyard, where a line of clothes hangs unmoving, sagging beneath the weight of neglect. No one has collected them. They sway slightly, as though someone might tug them free at any moment, but the hands that washed them have not returned. A thin grey shirt flaps half-heartedly in the breeze. Beside it hangs a woman's apron, stained with broth and soot. And at the very end of the line, almost hidden behind the doorframe, a child's small dress, its hem torn, the cloth stiff with dried pump water. The neighbors know whose laundry it is. Everyone here knows everyone's laundry. The garments belong to the Turner family, a mother, 2 children, and an aging grandfather who had been coughing so violently the week before that he could scarcely lift his head. Their room is just above the courtyard stairs, and for 3 days now, no one has seen them step outside. A girl of about 9 pauses on her way to the pump, staring at the forgotten clothes. She tugs her shawl tighter as she approaches, her bare feet leaving damp prints on the stone. "Mama says someone should take them in," she whispers to no one in particular, eyes fixed on the smallest dress. But her mother, who lingers behind her in the doorway, shakes her head sharply. "No," she murmurs. "Leave them." There is fear in her voice, the kind that has been carved into her through long years of sickness, passing from door to door like a restless visitor. Laundry carries more than soap and water. It holds fibers touched by fevered skin, patches where sweat soaked deep, seams where lice nestled unnoticed. In these slums, clothes can become silent carriers of a family's dying hours. The girl does not argue. She lowers her gaze and slinks toward the pump. As she goes, she scratches the back of her neck, a small, habitual motion, then disappears around the corner. The sun tries to break through the clouds, but succeeds only in casting a weak grey light over the courtyard. It's enough to reveal details others had tried not to see. A dark stain spreading along the apron's edge, a rip in the shirt that wasn't there before, the unmistakable stiffness of fabric that dried too quickly, the way cloth dries when soaked with fever, heat, not water. A man stepping outside to relieve himself stops short when he notices something unusual. A faint mark on the Turner family's door. A chalk line. Thin, hurried, drawn by someone in the night. Maybe the inspector, maybe a neighbor, maybe one of the children before the shivering overtook them. He stares at it for a long moment, then turns away. By midday, the wind picks up. The laundry sways harder now, no longer slow and heavy, but restless, flapping against one another, sleeves brushing sleeves like whispering hands. A passing woman instinctively reaches out to steady a shirt as it whips toward her face, but she catches herself just in time, recoiling as if she's touched something burning. The sun sets, and the laundry remains. Night falls, and the wind settles again. The courtyard grows quiet, too quiet, as though the slum itself is holding its breath. Still no one comes for the clothes. On the second night, rain begins to fall, tapping softly against the garments. The water runs down the cloth, carrying with it whatever the turners left behind. It drips into the stone, into the cracks, into the soil beneath the pump. It mingles with the water others will draw in the morning. And on the third morning, just before dawn, a faint cry echoes from somewhere upstairs, one short, sharp sound that frightens the birds perched on the roofs. No one answers it. The laundry remains on the line, soaked and trembling, a silent testimony to those who can no longer return to claim it. Night brings little rest to the lodging house on Bramble Court. Even when the lamps are blown out and the stairwell grows dim, the building hums with a quiet, uneasy life, the kind that never truly sleeps. Floorboards creak under the shifting weight of exhausted tenants. Someone mutters in their dreams. A kettle hisses faintly on a dying stove. Beneath it all, like a thin thread pulling through every room, there is talk. Low, trembling, unfinished talk. Whispers. Whispers are the true currency here. Not coin, not bread, not coal. Words, traded in breathless murmurs from bed to bed, telling who fell ill, who fled in the night, who hasn't answered their door since yesterday afternoon. The lodging house seems designed to carry these rumours, its walls thin enough for worry to pass through, its hallways close enough for secrets to collide, its windows trembling with the weight of overheard fears. Tonight, the whispers move quickly. In the women's dormitory on the second floor, two sisters lie awake in their shared cot, blankets pulled up to their chins. One stares at the ceiling, tracing the cracks with her eyes. The other listens to the soft, scratching sound crawling along the wall. Lice, most likely, or mice, or both. "Did you hear about the Turners?" The older sister breathes. The younger nods, though the darkness hides her frightened expression. "Mama said no one's gone inside since Tuesday." A shiver runs through her voice. "Do you think they're—" The word dead hangs between them, even though neither speaks it. Across the hall, a group of men returns from the factory, shoulders slumped, boots leaving muddy prints on the warped boards. They speak in hushed tones, casting wary glances toward the stairwell as though someone might be listening. One blows into his gloved hands to warm them. "I heard the inspector wouldn't go in," he whispers. Stood right there at the door and froze. Another nods grimly. Then the old man died anyway. Whole room stinking of fever. That's what Jimmy told me. A silence follows, heavy, lingering. Downstairs, in the narrow kitchen where three families share one stove, a woman stirs a pot of broth so thin it barely changes color. Her children sit at the small wooden table, heads heavy with fatigue. When the door creaks open and an elderly neighbor enters, the whisper spreads again. "There's sickness on the third floor," the woman murmurs behind her hand. "Mrs. Hall says she heard groaning through the vent. Says the fever's taken hold of the boy first." The neighbor crosses herself. "God help them," she says softly, but her voice wavers not from pity, but fear. In the dim corner near the back stairs, an older tenant sits alone, pipe extinguished, hands folded tightly in his lap. He listens to every murmur drifting from room to room. He stares at the wall as though he can see past it, into the spaces where fever curls like smoke. He has lived through outbreaks before: cholera, diphtheria, influenza, and each time it began the same way, with whispers. "It's happening again," he mutters to himself. You can hear it in the way they speak, the sickness creeping in through cracks. On the top floor, a cough breaks the stillness. Not the ordinary cough of dust or smoke, a deeper, tearing sound. A cough that leaves silence afterward, the kind that forces everyone within earshot to hold their breath. Then footsteps shuffle. A body collapses onto a bed. A low moan seeps through the boards, traveling down the hallway like an unwelcome tide. The whispers catch it instantly. A door cracks open. A child peers out. Someone pulls him back quickly. Someone else whispers, "Don't go near that room." Another replies, "Too late, If one has it, more will. Rumor becomes dread. Dread becomes truth. Truth becomes something that spreads faster than fever in this building made of rotten wood and packed bodies. By midnight, the whispers have shaped a new story. There is sickness on the 3rd floor. There is a fever behind the Turner door. There is something moving through the vent. Someone saw the inspector hesitate. Someone heard crying downstairs. Someone hasn't woken since yesterday. And though no one says the word aloud, the lodging house feels it breathing in the hallway. Typhus. By dawn, the whispers will be louder. By dusk, they will become screams. Before the sun has fully risen, the windows of the slum houses begin to fog. Not from the warmth of the morning, the air is still cold enough to bite, but from the fever, heat, trapped inside the rooms. Moisture gathers on the panes in long, trembling trails, distorting the outside world into wavering shapes. From the courtyard, the windows look like eyes clouded with sickness, each one blinking droplets down its cracked surface. In the Turner room, the sweat on the window pane is the first sign something is terribly wrong. The glass trembles with each breath the building exhales. Behind it, a dim glow flickers from a single candle left burning overnight, its wax spilling across the sill like melted bone. The pane is slick, filmed with a faint sheen of moisture that glistens in the early grey light. When the morning chill presses against the outer side of the window, it meets the fever heat pouring from the room, and the two clash in a silent battle that leaves the glass warm to the touch. Maggie Collins notices it first. She stands in the courtyard, clutching her younger brother's hand, waiting for their turn at the pump. She glances up toward the Turner window, the one where the little dress once hung behind drying sheets. The pane is so fogged she can barely make out the shape of the candlelight behind it. She tugs her brother's arm. "It's warm," she whispers, though the wind pulls at her hair with icy fingers. Her brother shrugs. Maybe they have a fire inside. But no one burns fuel in the slums unless absolutely necessary. Coal costs money, and money rarely makes it this far into the alley. Maggie steps closer, craning her neck. The sweat on the window pane thickens, gathering at the bottom edge, dripping down in slow, syrupy trails. Her mother emerges from the stairwell, balancing 2 empty buckets. She follows Maggie's gaze and stiffens. "Don't stare," she warns sharply, though her voice trembles. "And don't go near their door." Maggie nods, but curiosity gnaws at her. She lingers a second longer, watching the condensation bead and slide down the cracked glass. Her mother grips her shoulder and steers her toward the pump. "We can't help them," she mutters. Around them, the slum begins to wake. Doors open. Tenants shuffle out. A woman dumps a basin of dirty water onto the stones, watching it splash against the cold ground before trickling toward the daisy-choked drain. A man coughs so harshly he bends double, steadying himself against the wall. Children kick a rag ball through the mud, their laughter thin, reedy, uncertain. But every now and then, someone glances upward. Toward the window with the sweating glass, the Turner door remains shut. No footsteps echo behind it. No voices drift out. Even the rats seem to avoid the stairwell leading to their room. By midday, the sweat on the window pane grows so heavy it leaves streaks that resemble fingerprints dragged from the inside. A few neighbors gather in the corridor, whispering behind closed hands. The inspector's chalk mark still stains the Turner door. The air outside their room feels warmer, charged, as if holding its breath. Old Mrs. Kettle approaches the window from the courtyard, wiping her hands on her apron. She squints through the fogged pane, trying to see what lies beyond it. But the candle inside flickers weakly, distorted by the thick condensation. She cups her hand against the glass, leaning closer. The heat that radiates through it makes her flinch. "No living room should feel that hot," she murmurs, stepping back. Children stop playing. Adults stop talking. Even the wind seems to pause. Inside the Turner room, Fever has filled the air like steam inside a bathhouse. Heat rises, sweat climbs the walls. The window pane carries the weight of it, each drop sliding down the glass, a reminder of bodies burning from the inside out. By the time night falls again, the pane is so clouded it looks painted white. And when someone finally gathers the courage to knock on the Turner door, the heat that seeps through the cracks is the only answer they receive. In the slums, a doctor's arrival is usually heard long before he is seen. Hurried boots on the stairs, a firm knock at the door, a sharp voice asking who is sick and how long they've been that way. But tonight, the man who enters Bramble Court walks differently. His footsteps are soft, hesitant, almost apologetic, as though he is trying not to disturb whatever misery already hangs in the air. Dr. Halvorsen is a thin man, his coat too large for his shoulders, his spectacles perpetually smudged. He carries a worn leather satchel that once belonged to someone with more hope than he possesses now. By the time he reaches the second-floor landing, he is already sweating beneath his collar, not from the climb, but from dread. He has been called to this building more times than he can count, and each time the sickness inside has grown more stubborn, more familiar, more unforgiving. He pauses before the Turner door. A bead of moisture rolls down the frame, drawn out by the fever trapped within. The heat, radiating from the wood, makes the doctor's hand hover in mid-air before he finally brings his knuckles to the surface. He knocks once, gently. The echo is soft, too soft. No footsteps approach, no voice answers. Behind him, two neighbors linger in the hallway, their faces pale, their hands wringing the ends of their sleeves. They do not speak, they do not offer to assist. They keep their distance as if the fever could leap from the cracks in the door and latch onto their throats. The doctor knows better. Disease does not leap, but it creeps, it slides, it waits. And it always enters through the smallest, most human of openings: touch, breath, care. He knocks again. This time, the door shifts inward with a low groan. It was not latched. The heat that spills into the hallway is oppressive, thick enough to feel on the skin. Dr. Halvorsen steps inside, his breath catching as the smell closes around him: sweat, illness, damp cloth, and something metallic beneath it all. He sets his lantern on the table, its light flickering across the cramped space. The Turner children lie huddled together on the cot, their faces flushed red, hair plastered to their temples. Their small chests rise and fall with shallow, uneven breaths. The youngest moans softly, curling her body inward as if fleeing an unseen hand. Their mother lies near the wall, her skin pale as wax, a hand still outstretched toward the children, even in unconsciousness. The doctor kneels beside her, pressing two fingers to her neck. He closes his eyes. The neighbors in the hall shift anxiously. One whispers, "Well?" The doctor does not answer. He stands, wiping his hand on a cloth already damp with someone else's fever. He moves toward the children, lifting the smallest child's eyelid gently with his thumb. Her gaze does not focus. Her skin burns beneath his touch. He sighs a long, exhausted sound that has lived in his lungs far too long. "This is typhus," he says quietly, not turning toward the door. "The fever has taken hold." The words crawl into the hallway like smoke. One of the neighbors gasps. The other steps backward until her shoulders hit the opposite wall. The doctor ignores their retreat. He reaches into his satchel and pulls out a small tin of fever powder, though he knows it will do little more than ease the shaking. He mixes a pinch with water from a cracked mug and presses it to the older child's lips. "Drink," he murmurs. The child obeys, but the liquid dribbles down his chin. The doctor wipes it away with a trembling hand. He is not afraid of death. He has walked alongside it for years, but he is afraid of failing children, afraid of leaving this room with nothing to offer but pity, afraid of the quiet. He stands again, staring at the sweating window pane, at the candle burning low, at the impossible heaviness of the air. "I'll send help," he says, though he knows there is none to send. He gathers his satchel, steps back into the hallway and closes the Turner door behind him. His footsteps down the stairs are softer still, not from caution, but from sorrow. And long after he has gone, the slums keep echoing those two quiet footsteps, as if marking the path between the living and those already slipping beyond reach. Dawn creeps into the slums without color, without warmth, without mercy. It arrives pale and shivering, the kind of dawn that seems afraid to touch the ground. Fog hangs low over the courtyard, clinging to door frames and broken shutters like a stubborn illness of its own. And through that fog comes the sound everyone knows too well, the slow, wooden creak of wheels dragging across uneven stone. The fever cart. It appears at first as a dim shape, a silhouette pushing itself forward out of the mist. Two men walk beside it, shoulders hunched, eyes lowered, scarves pulled up over their mouths in a futile barrier against the sickness that saturates everything around them. They are not doctors, not inspectors, just labourers hired by the parish to collect what the night has taken. Their steps are heavy, reluctant. They know each stop before they reach it. They always do. When the cart enters the court fully, its wheels grind loudly over the stones, jarring everyone who still sleeps behind their thin walls. Curtains shift, doors creak open by an inch, then shut quickly again. No one wants to be seen watching. No one wants their gaze mistaken for a plea. The cart stops first at the Turner door. A moment passes thick and waiting before one of the men raps his knuckles against the wood. There is no answer. The fog swirls around them as though trying to cover the scene, trying to hide what must come next. The worker pushes the door gently. It yields without resistance, releasing a breath of warm, fever-sour air into the cold morning. The men step inside. From the courtyard, the neighbours avert their eyes. Even those who strain to hear every whisper in the lodging house now pretend not to listen. Shame, fear, pity, it all blends together into the same brittle silence. Inside the Turner room, the men move quickly, almost tenderly. They lift the mother first, her body light from weeks of hunger and fever. Her hair, once neatly braided, now lies tangled across her face. One of the workers brushes it aside without thinking, the gesture small but achingly human. She is wrapped carefully in an old wool sheet, the same one that once warmed her children, and laid gently onto the cart. The children remain alive, but barely. The doctor's powder still sits untouched on the table beside them. Their cheeks burn with fever, their breaths come thin and rasping. One of the men hesitates, looking at them with something like pleading in his eyes. "Should we?" he begins. But the other shakes his head. They live. So long as they breathe, they stay. It is cruel comfort, but it is truth. The cart moves again, wheels scraping. The sound drifts through the slum like a reminder, a warning, a promise of return. As the men continue their rounds, they stop at another house, the widow Ames, who had not come to the pump in 2 days. Her door opens to reveal her sitting upright in her chair, head bowed, hands clasped around a rosary that hasn't been touched since her final breath. Her neighbor, a trembling young man, slips into the hall, murmuring a prayer as the workers carry her out. The cart grows heavier with each stop. At one doorway, a child watches silently from behind her mother's skirt. Her eyes are wide, unblinking. She clutches a rag doll with one hand, the other twisting nervously in her shawl. As the cart passes her, the child's breath catches not in fear, but in recognition. She has seen it before. She will see it again. The fever cart never leaves the slums empty. By the time the sun finally forces its way through the fog, its pale light lands on the cart's departing wheels, leaving wet tracks behind them, a trail of loss etched into the stone for those who dare look. And as the slums wake fully, life continues as though nothing has happened. But everyone knows the truth. When the fever cart arrives at dawn, it marks the end of one night's suffering and the beginning of another. The river is the only thing in the slums that seems to move with purpose. Even when the rest of the neighborhood lies heavy with sickness, when rooms burn with fever, when stairwells choke with stale air, when the very walls seem to sweat with exhaustion, the river keeps flowing. Relentless, cold, indifferent. It winds past warehouses and soot-blackened chimneys, past the crooked wharf where children play in the mud, past the laundry stones slick with algae and old soap. And every morning, long before the sun reaches the water, the laundresses gather along its edge. This morning, only one girl stands there. She is thin, her dress clinging damply to her legs, her sleeves rolled past her elbows. Her name is Eliza. She cannot be more than 14, though the slums have a way of aging people long before their time. She kneels on the uneven stones, gripping a bundle of clothing in her trembling hands. The garments belong to her employer, a family who lives a few streets away, their home grand in comparison to the lodging house where she sleeps. They will never see this river. They will never smell it. They will never understand how cold it is at dawn, how the water bites at the skin hard enough to numb the fingers within seconds. Eliza dips the clothes into the murky grey surface and begins to scrub. Her motions are slow, heavy, as if each movement costs her a small piece of strength. Her breath clouds in the air, drifting upward before vanishing into the morning fog. Sweat beads at her hairline despite the cold. She pauses, lifting a hand to wipe it away. But it isn't sweat. Her forehead burns beneath her fingertips. She tries to ignore it, tries to tell herself she's just cold, or tired, or hungry. The slums offer these explanations freely, but none of them fit the heat gathering behind her eyes, the dizziness rising like a tide inside her skull. She presses a hand to the stone to steady herself. The world tilts for a moment, then rights itself slowly, like a boat struggling to balance in a rough current. Behind her, the city stirs awake. A cart rattles over planks at the nearby jetty. A fisherman curses as he untangles a net. Farther down the river, a factory bell tolls low, metallic, echoing across the water. Normally, these sounds comfort Eliza. They remind her that life continues, that she is not alone in the early hours. Today, they feel distant, muffled, smothered beneath the weight of whatever burns inside her. She picks up a shirt and plunges it into the river. The cold shocks her hands, rushing up her arms in waves. But the relief is temporary. Sweat blooms across her neck again, sliding down her spine in thin, trembling trails. Her breathing quickens. The stone beneath her seems to pulse, as if she is kneeling on something alive. Her vision blurs. The river's edge bends and wavers, the shadows stretching into shapes she cannot quite place. She blinks hard, shaking her head. The dizziness grows stronger. The shirt slips from her fingers and floats toward the deeper water, carried gently by the current. She reaches for it, then stops. Her arm is shaking violently now. Her fingers twitch uncontrollably. She pulls them close to her chest, clutching her elbows as if her own limbs no longer belong to her. A whimper escapes her, barely audible above the river's steady murmur. A passing woman notices her. She slows her steps, brows knitting. For a moment, she hesitates, fear warring with compassion. She recognizes the look in Eliza's eyes, the way the fever begins, quietly, softly, almost politely, before it tears through a body with ruthless intent. The woman takes a tentative step toward the girl. "Eliza?" she calls gently. No answer. Another step. "Eliza, love, are you?" The girl sways. The bundle of clothes slips from her lap, and Eliza collapses onto the stones, her body folding in on itself like a wilted flower. The woman rushes forward, calling for help, her voice cracking, echoing off the water. But the river keeps flowing, unmoved, unaffected, carrying the lost shirt away as if it were nothing more than another piece of drifting debris. In the slums, even at the water's edge, fever finds you, and the river doesn't stop for anyone. Mr. Bexley arrives just after noon, when the slums are at their warmest, when the air inside the tenements turns thick and stale, when the heat rising from fevered rooms clings to the hallway like invisible smoke. He is dressed too finely for this place. A stiff grey coat, brushed clean of dust, polished boots that have never stepped through the sludge at the river's edge, and a ledger tucked beneath his arm that he guards more carefully than any human soul in the building. He does not knock on doors. He does not ask after the sick. He does not breathe through his scarf the way the residents do. Instead, he walks directly to the first landing, opens his ledger, and begins his rounds. To Bexley, the slums are not a home. They are numbers, doors to be checked, rents to be collected, repairs to be postponed. Each room is an entry on his page, measured in shillings, not suffering. Every tenant represents income, unless, of course, they become too ill to pay. Then they represent only loss. He stops at the Turner door. The chalk mark startles him not because of what it means, but because it is new, unexpected, unrecorded. Sweat beads at the base of the doorframe. The air leaking out is warm, humid, wrong. A smell drifts from the seam where the door meets the floor. Sweet, thick, unmistakably fever. Bexley frowns, touches the door with 2 fingers, then immediately wipes his hand on his coat. Unfortunate, he mutters, scribbling something in his ledger. 3 weeks arrears, no recovery expected. He makes no move to open the door. He never does in these cases. Instead, he closes the ledger and heads to the next room, the Collins family, overdue by only 1 week. He raps sharply on the door. Maggie's mother answers, her face pale, her hair pulled into a trembling knot. Her hands shake as she grips the doorknob. "Oh, Mr. Bexley. Sir, we just need a few more days," she whispers. "The children." Bexley raises a hand sharply, silencing her. "Rent is rent," he says flatly. "Illness or no illness." Behind her, one of the children coughs a thin, wheezing sound. She steps instinctively between Bexley and the source of the cough, as though shielding him or shielding her child from his gaze. Bexley sighs, an exaggerated display of inconvenience. He glances past her into the dim room, assessing the furniture, a table, a cracked basin, 2 cots, calculating how much of it could be sold if they default. "I'll return tomorrow," he says coldly. "Be prepared." As he walks away, the woman's shoulders collapse inward. She closes the door and presses her forehead to the wood, fighting tears. Bexley does not notice, or rather, he chooses not to. On the 3rd floor, he reaches old Mrs. Kettle's room. He knocks only once before entering without waiting for her to respond. He knows she cannot rise quickly enough to stop him. She sits in her rocking chair, wrapped in blankets, her skin ashen, her breaths shallow. "Rent," he announces. Mrs. Kettle tries to speak, but the words dissolve into a violent cough. She presses a handkerchief to her lips, the same one she shares with half the corridor, and lowers it just enough for Bexley to see the dark stain blooming across the cloth. He steps back sharply, disgust flickering across his face. "I'll send word for removal if you don't pay by tomorrow," he says, retreating toward the door. His voice trembles slightly, not with pity, but with annoyance. He leaves before she can answer. By late afternoon, Bexley reaches the final landing, where several doors remain closed, sealed from within, silent except for the occasional moan drifting through the cracks. He marks each door with neat, crisp strokes of his pen. Unpaid, unresponsive, likely vacated soon. He doesn't have to write the last word. It is implied, understood, expected. At the bottom of the stairwell, the fever cart tracks still stain the stones. Bexley steps over them without looking down, as though stepping over spilled milk rather than the remnants of death. The tenants watch from behind cracked doors as he leaves the building, his boots untouched by the mud, his coat spotless. He never once looks back, because in buildings like these, Landlords don't count lives. They count how many doors will be empty by winter. Morning settles over the slums in a bruised shade of grey, the kind of half-light that makes every building look older, wearier, more defeated than the day before. The fog hasn't yet lifted from the chimney tops, and the cold curls itself tightly around ankles as residents shuffle toward the narrow alley leading to the parish soup kitchen. It opens at 8, or rather, it tries to, but the line has already formed long before dawn. A winding column of silent, hollow-faced figures stretching down the street like a living shadow. The soup kitchen is nothing more than a single-room annex, attached to a church whose stones are blackened by soot and grief. Smoke leaks through its cracked chimney as volunteers begin their work stirring great metal pots of thin broth, chopping what few vegetables they manage to save from spoiling, and wiping the condensation from the windows before it gathers again minutes later. The smell floats into the air: watery cabbage, overcooked carrots, a faint hint of onion. It is not pleasant, but it is food, and that is enough. Children are the first to arrive. Tiny hands grip dented tin bowls, bare feet shuffle in the mud. Their breath rises in little clouds as they whisper to one another stories of fever, of fathers who didn't return from the factory, of rooms so cold their blankets froze at the edge. Yet even their chatter is quiet today. Hunger dulls the voice before anything else. Near the front of the line stands Thomas Weller, a man whose shoulders once carried the strength of a dock worker, but now slump beneath the weight of fever and exhaustion. He leans heavily on his walking stick, his breath rattling in his chest. Every few minutes, he lifts a hand to wipe sweat from his brow. Though the morning is frigid, the people behind him take a cautious step back. They know what fever in this line means. They've seen others collapse while waiting for their bowl. He doesn't notice their retreat. Or perhaps he does and chooses to ignore it. Behind Thomas stands Eliza's brother, a small boy wrapped in a coat far too large for him. He glances toward the river where his sister was found the day before, still unconscious, carried home by neighbors with trembling hands. The boy holds his bowl close to his chest, knuckles white. He hasn't eaten since yesterday. His stomach growls loudly enough that the woman behind him flinches. Still, he stays in line, staring at the church doors as though willing them to open. Further back, a pair of factory girls lean into each other for warmth. Their cheeks are hollow, their fingers chapped and cracked from washing rags in cold basins. One of them coughs into her sleeve, a dry, scraping sound. Her friend squeezes her hand, saying nothing. Words are wasted energy. When the church bells finally toll, the sound ripples through the line like relief and dread. The doors open. The crowd surges forward a step, not chaotic, not loud, just desperately eager. Hunger has a way of teaching discipline. One by one, they move toward the pot where the volunteers ladle broth into bowls with solemn, mechanical motions. The liquid splashes into metal containers, steaming faintly before the cold steals the warmth. Inside the soup kitchen, the air is thick with bodies, breath, and condensation. The windows fog so heavily that no one outside can see in. Children huddle together near the wall, slurping quickly. Adults eat slower, conserving heat and strength. No one speaks above a murmur, not out of politeness, but because loud voices feel wrong here, in a place built on the bones of charity and desperation. Thomas Weller receives his bowl and steps aside, lowering himself onto a bench. He raises the spoon to his lips, but his hand trembles violently, sending droplets across the table. He tries again. The spoon reaches his mouth, but he spills more than he swallows. Sweat beads on his temples. His breathing grows more shallow, more labored. The woman beside him shifts away nervously. Within minutes, Thomas slumps forward. His bowl slips from his grasp, splashing broth across the floor. A few gasps rise from nearby, but no one screams, no one rushes to help. Instead, there is a quiet, instinctive shuffle, bodies pulling back, space opening around him like a widening ring of dread. A volunteer approaches hesitantly, pressing 2 fingers to Thomas's neck. Too late. The line keeps moving outside. More people enter. More bowls are filled. The soup kitchen absorbs Thomas's death with the same weary resignation it absorbs everything else. And as the door closes again, sealing in the heat and the fear, the line outside stretches even longer, a testament to the cruel truth of the slums. Hunger doesn't wait for the dead. The street is quieter than usual tonight, not because the slums have grown gentle, but because fear has a way of muffling even the loudest corners of the city. It begins with one window, then another still, curtains drawn tight, blankets nailed over frames, rags stuffed into cracks where cold air normally slips through. Covered windows are a language everyone here understands. They mean sickness, they mean danger, they mean a family inside is fighting something the rest of the slum hopes will not spill outward into the night. Bramble Court has seen its share of covered windows before, but never so many at once. I walk slowly down the main alley, boots brushing against puddles filled with coal dust and pump water. The buildings loom overhead, leaning in on each other like tired giants, their brick faces smeared with soot and moisture. Behind the curtains, faint candlelight flickers soft, trembling, desperate. Occasionally, a shadow passes across the fabric. The silhouette of a woman tending to a child, a man pacing, a body turning restlessly in bed. Not a single window opens. Not a single breath of fresh air escapes. The first window belongs to the Turner family, or what remains of it. Their curtain is drawn so tightly that the rod above it bends slightly under the strain. The candle behind it burns low, its glow dim and erratic. No voices, no movement. Everyone knows not to go near it. Even the rats scuttle past it warily, whiskers twitching as though sensing the fever inside. Next to the Turners, the Wilkes family has covered their windows with 2 mismatched blankets, one striped, one patched. A draught still escapes from the edges, carrying with it the faint smell of vinegar and sweat, where someone inside has tried to cool a relentless fever. A woman's voice drifts out occasionally, murmuring prayers through cracked lips, but she never lifts the blanket. Further down, the Ames window shows only darkness. The old widow was taken away 2 mornings ago, wrapped in a sheet before the fever cart carried her away. Yet her family keeps the window covered, as though removing the cloth would release her ghost into the street. The slums believe in such things. Superstition grows fastest where grief lives longest. Across the alley, the Collins girl peers through a narrow gap in her curtain, eyes wide and unblinking. For a moment, our gazes meet through the shadows. She lifts a finger to her lips, a silent plea. Her mother is ill, sweating through the sheets upstairs, and the family has already been warned not to open their windows, not even for air. Maggie closes the gap and disappears again, swallowed by the dim room behind her. The street feels colder with each covered window I pass, colder and heavier, as though the cloth over each pane is a bandage on a wound too large for anyone to heal. A sudden groan echoes from the building on my left. Someone coughs, a deep, rattling cough that shakes the wall. Then another. Then a child cries faintly before being hushed. The alley holds its breath. No one opens their door. No one calls out. Even the pump at the corner stands untouched, its handle slick with condensation but frozen in place. People are too afraid to gather tonight, too afraid that one uncovered window might be enough to infect a dozen families. The lanterns burn low, casting weak halos on the wet stones. Many shadows, no footsteps. Only the wind moves freely here, slipping between shutters and rustling the cloth nailed over window frames. It carries the scent of fever with it, a bitter, metallic note that rides the air like a warning. By the time I reach the end of the alley, I turn back to face the street. Every covered window stares back like a blinded eye. The slums have learned a terrible truth. Sometimes survival means shutting out the world. And sometimes it means shutting yourself in with the very thing that's killing you. Tonight, no windows open. Tonight, no curtains lift. Tonight, the slums hide behind cloth, hoping the night passes without claiming another family. But deep inside those shrouded rooms, the fever burns on. The slums have no newspapers, no bulletins tacked to posts, no official voices announcing who has fallen ill or who slipped away in the night. Instead, the news runs on small feet, quick, restless, and unavoidably noticed. It is carried by a boy no older than 12, perhaps 13, though hunger has carved years from him and fever-choked winters have stolen inches from his height. His name is Rowan, though most simply call him the Runner. He wakes before daylight, long before the factory bells ring. The cold bites at his toes as he slips out of his cot, careful not to wake his younger sister, who curls in sleep like a leaf folded tight against the wind. Their mother lies nearby, buried beneath blankets patched and repatched until the fabric is more stitch than cloth. Her breathing is shallow this morning, the kind that makes Rowan pause before he leaves, waiting a moment longer to see if her chest rises again. When it does, barely, he exhales with visible relief and steps quietly into the hallway. The air is cold, still, and somehow stale. The whispers that filled the building last night have gone quiet, replaced by the lingering hush of rooms holding their breath. Rowan walks down the stairs barefoot. He cannot risk ruining his only pair of shoes in the freezing muck outside, but he doesn't mind. The floorboards, swollen with damp, have become familiar to him. He knows every creak, every dip in the wood. Outside, the sky remains dark, but the slum is already awake in its own subdued way. Doors open an inch at a time. Pale faces peer out, gauging the morning, checking the street before daring to step forward. Rowan pulls his thin jacket tighter and begins his route not because anyone said he must, but because someone always has to. He starts with the alley nearest the river, where yesterday's fever claimed the life of Thomas Weller. Rowan had watched the fever cart take him away, watched the empty bowl roll across the soup kitchen floor with a soft clang. Now, he knocks gently on the Wilkins door. When Mrs. Wilkins answers, eyes red-rimmed with worry, Rowan lowers his head respectfully. "Mrs. Wilkins?" "It's Mr. Weller. He passed in the night." Her face collapses inward. She whispers a prayer, touches Rowan's cheek with trembling fingers, and shuts the door with a finality he's grown used to. He doesn't linger. He moves on. Next is the hallway where the Turner children lie fevered. Rowan approaches carefully, listening. No crying, no coughing, just a heavy silence pressing through the cracks. He doesn't knock, not yet. Instead, he marks the moment quietly in his mind. The Turner room stays silent today. He knows what silence means. By the time he reaches the courtyard, dawn has begun its slow crawl. Light seeps into the slums reluctantly, as though fearful of what it might reveal. A few children hover near the pump, but keep their distance. Their mothers have warned them to mind the covered windows, the fevered houses, the chalk marks. Rowan crosses the courtyard toward the baker's widow. She always asks for news, always insists on knowing who needs help, who needs broth, who might need a warm rag or a whispered prayer. He knocks, and she opens the door with flour still dusting her sleeves. "Boy?" she asks softly. "Mrs. Ames passed," Rowan murmurs, "and the inspector came to the Turners. He's gone now, but no one opened the door this morning." She closes her eyes in grief and gratitude. Grief for those lost, gratitude for the news delivered. "Thank you, Rowan," she whispers, pressing a small crust of bread into his palm. Warm, fresh, a blessing. "Eat something today." He nods and slips it into his jacket pocket instead, saving it for his sister. As he moves down the final row of houses, the fog lifts enough for the slum to fully greet the day. Coughing from an upstairs window, the slam of a door as someone rushes to work, a baby wailing somewhere behind a curtain. Life continues, as it always does. even as death weaves between the doorframes. Rowan takes a slow breath, lifting his face toward the pale sky. His route is nearly done. One more house, one more knock, one more piece of news delivered before the factory claims him for the day. He doesn't choose to carry the news. But in a world where fever travels faster than footsteps and silence is a herald of death, someone must. Rowan turns the corner and disappears down the alley, bare feet soft against the stone, leaving behind the echo of a boy who brings truth to a place desperate for it, even when the truth hurts. By late afternoon, the sky hangs low and heavy, a dull pewter ceiling pressing down on the slums. The air tastes of soot and sorrow, and the wind carries a chill sharp enough to rattle loose shutters. It is on such days that funerals come quickly, too quickly, because fever leaves neither time nor mercy for the rituals the living might wish to give the dead. The parish bell tolls once, a low, trembling note that drifts through Bramble Court like the last breath of something ancient. Doors open just wide enough for eyes to peer out. No one steps forward yet. No one wants to be the first to confirm what the bell already told them. Rowan is the one who walks into the road, his small shoulders hunched against the wind. He carries a worn cloth pouch tied at the wrist, one his mother used for laundry pegs long before her health declined. Today, it holds something far more fragile. A lock of hair wrapped in paper, a keepsake for a sister too sick to stand, too weak to watch their grandfather's body be taken away. The slums do not wait for illness to quiet. They do not give time for families to gather. When fever claims someone, the parish men arrive within hours to carry the body to the edge of the city for burial. Delays only spread death further. At the Turner door, two neighbors stand silently, heads bowed. Someone has tried to scrub the chalk mark from the wood, but it lingers faintly, smeared like a fading bruise. The window is still covered, still sweating, still too warm. The children inside remain alive, tragically so, as they must now mourn another loss from behind the fever curtain. But today's funeral is not for the Turners. It is for Mrs. Ames, whose rosary slipped from her hands 2 nights ago. The door to her room stands open now, a muted invitation. Parish workers move inside with a quiet efficiency that would seem cold if not for the gentleness with which they lift her. They wrap her in a plain linen sheet, folding it carefully beneath her chin, as though arranging her for a night's sleep rather than her final rest. Her hands are placed together atop her chest, fingers curled as though still remembering the motion of prayer. A small crowd gathers in the hall. Not close, never close, but close enough to show respect. Close enough that they can murmur her name under their breath without drawing attention. She was kind, someone whispers. She always shared her bread, murmurs another. Rowan steps to the railing, watching as they carry her down the stairs. He presses the cloth pouch to his chest, his breaths uneven. He thinks of how she used to greet him with a soft smile each dawn, asking him for the latest news. He thinks of the cracked teacup she always offered, filled with barely warm broth, but brimming with kindness he never forgot. Outside, the street feels even colder. The parish cart waits near the entrance, its wooden boards stained with the weight of too many bodies. A thin layer of frost gathers along the edges. A lantern flickers from the driver's seat, casting a pale light across the courtyard. The workers lay Mrs. Ames inside. Someone sobs softly. Someone crosses themselves. Someone else turns away, unable to watch. The cart creaks as the horse begins to pull. Rowan walks a few steps behind it, not close enough to join the procession, but near enough to witness it. The wind tugs at his jacket, at the edges of the cloth pouch he holds. He doesn't cry. Not yet. In the slums, tears are often postponed until you are alone. A woman places a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Go home, love," she murmurs. "You've done enough." Rowan nods but does not move until the cart turns the corner and disappears into the fog, carrying Mrs. Ames toward the parish graveyard, a place where names fade quickly in the rain and earth claims the dead without ceremony. Only when the last echo of wheels fades does Rowan let out a long, hollow breath. Behind him, life resumes its grim rhythm. Doors close, curtains fall back into place, and the fever, relentless as always, circles the next room it will claim. In the slums, the living bury their dead swiftly, not because they want to, but because they must, and there is never time to wait for morning. The day after Mrs. Ames is taken away, the slums wake with a different kind of heaviness, not the slow ache of hunger or the restless groan of a sleepless night, but the weight of dread settling into the brick itself. It hangs over Bramble Court like a bruise. Even the wind moves quietly, slipping between the houses, as though trying not to disturb whatever lurks inside. And then, from the Turner stairwell, comes a sound no one can ignore. A low drag, fabric scraping wood, a dull thump on each step. At first, no one opens their doors. They simply listen. Another thump, another dragged inch. Rowan, still shaken from the previous day's funeral, peeks through the thin crack in his door. The hallway is dim, but he can make out a shape, a corner of a mattress, frayed and stained, bumping its way down one step at a time. Two men struggle beneath it, their breaths loud in the narrow space, their feet slipping on the damp boards. They do not speak, neither looks up. By the time they reach the landing, a few doors creak open. The neighbors lean out cautiously, their hands covering their noses and mouths, scarves pulled high across their faces. Everyone knows what it means when a mattress is dragged into the yard. It means the fever has burned too long in that room. It means the bed is no longer safe to keep. It means someone or several someones have lain on it for their final hours. The mattress lands with a heavy thud on the courtyard stones. It is thicker than most, patched with mismatched cloth, its edges stiff with old sweat. A dark stain spreads across the middle, irregular in shape, too large to ignore. The last days of the Turners are written into that fabric, and everyone knows it. A few steps above, Maggie Collins watches from her window, her face pale behind the curtain. She whispers something to her little brother, who clings to her arm, as though fearing the fever might leap out of the mattress and find him next. Old Mrs. Kettle shuffles toward the railing, her hands trembling around the balustrade. "Burn it," she croaks. "Don't leave it here. Burn it before the fleas scatter." The men nod silently. They know. Everyone knows. One man reaches for a rusted oil tin near the pump, sloshing its contents over the mattress. The smell is sharp, biting kerosene, cheap and potent. The other man steps back, wiping his brow with a shaking hand. Sweat beads along his temples despite the cold. Someone whispers, "Who was the last to sleep on it?" Another replies softly, "All of them." No one asks which survived. The silence carries the answer. A spark is struck. For a moment, the flame hesitates, flickering weakly against the damp. Then, with a sudden whoosh, it catches, racing across the fabric. The mattress curls inward as it burns, the heat rising in frantic waves. Smoke spirals upward, black and thick, slipping into the cracks of windows, clinging to the clotheslines above. Children hide behind their mothers' skirts. Men lower their eyes. Women whisper prayers under their breath. The fire consumes everything, the stains, the straw, the fever-soaked cloth, but it cannot consume the memory of the room where it lay. The heat that seeped from the window pane, the quiet footsteps of the doctor who arrived too late. As the flames die down, only a charred frame remains, springs twisted like broken ribs. The men step back, exhausted, their clothes darkened with smoke. They exchange a tired nod. It's done, but the slums know better. Nothing is ever truly done here. A burned mattress does not erase a fever, nor does it stop the next one from settling into the next bed. When the men leave, the courtyard falls silent again, save for the crackle of dying embers. The neighbors retreat behind their covered windows. Rowan returns to his mother's bedside. Maggie closes her curtain, and in the faint smoke drifting upward, the slums breathe out the truth. Another room has fallen. Another family fades. Another mattress waits its turn. The fire may have burned the bed clean, but the fever still lingers in the air. By the time evening folds itself over Bramble Court, the air inside the buildings has grown unbearably close. Doors stay shut, curtains remain drawn. The slums inhale fever and exhale dread, and every hallway feels one breath away from collapse. The pump outside has run nearly dry, not from lack of use, but from too much. The line that stretched for hours has thinned, leaving only the echo of buckets scraping stone and the faintest trace of muddy water drying on the ground. Inside a narrow room on the 3rd floor, Mr. Harrow lies on a cot pushed against the wall, his body half-shadowed by the failing light of a single candle. His skin is tight across his cheekbones, his lips cracked, his chest rising in shallow, uneven gasps. He has not moved much since dawn. Fever has swallowed him whole. On the table beside him rests a tin cup, dented, scraped, bent slightly out of shape, containing the last bit of water the family managed to draw that morning. A thin film clings to its surface, catching the glow of the candle like frost. That cup is the only clean thing left in the room. His wife, Ellen, sits beside him, wringing a damp cloth between her trembling fingers. Her hair, once pinned neatly under her bonnet, now hangs in unruly strands along her face, glued to her temples by the heat of the room. She reaches for the cup with unsteady hands, lifting it slowly, carefully, as though it contains something holy. "Tom," she whispers, leaning close. "Try. Just a sip." His eyelids flutter, but he doesn't respond. She touches the cup to his lips. His mouth opens only slightly, the smallest crack. When the water touches his tongue, his body reacts a faint swallow, a twitch of effort, but nothing more. Most of it spills down the side of his jaw, soaking into the pillow. She pulls the cup away, her hands beginning to shake, not from exhaustion, but from fear. "Please," she murmurs, barely able to shape the word. "Don't leave us." In the corner, their son Jonah watches silently. He is 10, too young to understand what death fully means, too old not to recognize it when it stands at the foot of his father's bed. He clutches his knees to his chest, his fingers digging into the fabric of his trousers. The room smells of sweat and sickness, the sharp, sour scent of a body fighting its last battle. Jonah breathes through his mouth, terrified, though he tries not to show it. The candle flickers. The tin cup trembles in Ellen's grasp. Outside, someone shouts in the alley a panicked cry, cut short by coughing. The sound drifts up through the cracked window, weaving into the stillness of the room. Jonah flinches. Ellen does not react. Her world has narrowed to the cot, the cup, and the frail rise and fall of her husband's chest. She lifts the cup again, her hand shaking harder this time. She tilts it toward his lips once more. "Please, Tom, drink." But the fever has already taken too much. His eyes remain closed, his breaths shallow and fading. His fingers twitch once at his side, reaching for something no one in the room can see, then fall still. Jonah's small voice breaks the silence. "Mama?" Ellen does not answer. The cup slips from her hand and hits the floor with a dull, final clatter. The last of the water spreads slowly across the boards, too thin to drink, too precious to waste, too late to save him. She lowers her forehead to Tom's chest and lets her sobs shake the room. The tin cup rolls to a stop near Jonah's feet. He picks it up with both hands, staring at the small pool of water that clings to the bottom. In the dim candlelight, it shines like something sacred, the last mercy his family had to give. He lifts it to his lips and drinks it himself, because hunger and thirst do not stop for grief. And in the slums, neither does death. Night settles unevenly over Bramble Court, as if even the darkness is too weary to fully cover the slums. A few lamps burn in the windows, their weak light trembling behind sheets and rags hung to preserve privacy. The air smells of damp linen, smoke, and the metallic tang of fever lingering in every corridor. It is in this uneasy half-light that the midwife arrives too late and too afraid, yet somehow still choosing to step inside. Her name is Maura Briggs, though most simply call her Miss Briggs or the midwife, depending on how urgently they need her. She is a woman of 40, with hands that have delivered dozens of children into this unforgiving world, and a face lined not by age but by worry. Today, she walks with her leather bag clutched tightly against her side, its bottles clinking softly with every step. Her boots are soaked through from the river mud. She has crossed nearly the whole district on foot, answering a call she prayed would wait until morning. It didn't. A labouring mother has been screaming on the second floor since dusk, a harsh, breaking cry that cut through the slums long before Miss Briggs could reach the door. Now, at last, she stands before the room, chest heaving, breath visible in the cold air. Her knuckles hover over the wood for just a second too long before she knocks. Inside, chaos greets her. A young woman lies on a narrow bed, drenched in sweat, her hair plastered to her skull. Her eyes dart wildly from corner to corner, following sounds only she can hear. Fever has sunk its claws deep into her body long before labor began. Now it burns her from the inside out. Two neighbors stand beside the bed, helpless and frantic, wringing their hands in panic as another wave of pain grips the mother's body. Miss Briggs takes command the moment she steps inside. "Open the window," she orders. "Bring more water. Boil whatever you can." Her voice is firm, but the room does not obey. The window remains covered, sealed shut against the cold and the fever. No one dares lift the blanket nailed across it. Fresh air might help the mother, but it could doom the rest of the building. The neighbors exchange a look filled with dread. "We can't open it," one whispers. "Not with the fever spreading." Miss Briggs swallows hard. She knows they are right. She also knows the mother has little chance without air. But she presses on. She kneels beside the bed, wiping the woman's brow with a damp cloth, checking her pulse, feeling the fever thrum beneath her fingertips like a drumbeat. Beneath the blanket, the woman's belly tightens with another contraction, forcing a cry from her throat so raw it echoes through the hall. "You must push," Miss Briggs urges gently. The mother tries. Her hands clutch the sheets until her knuckles turn white. She groans, shaking with exhaustion. The fever has drained her strength, body and mind, consumed by the fire burning under her skin. Time passes strangely in that room. Minutes stretch into hours. The candle melts slow as grief. The air grows hotter, heavier, as if the sickbed itself is exhaling fever into every corner. Miss Briggs feels perspiration bead along her neck. She wipes it away with the back of her hand and continues working, her breath steady but shallow. At last, with a final wrenching cry, the child is born. A small, silent bundle, too still. Miss Briggs lifts the infant carefully, pressing her ear to its chest. Nothing. She rubs its back with trembling hands, trying to coax breath into tiny lungs. Nothing still. The neighbors sob quietly. The mother, delirious from fever, does not understand. "Is it coming?" she whispers. "Is it here?" Miss Briggs cannot answer. Her throat tightens painfully as she places the infant on a folded blanket, wrapping it gently, reverently, before turning back to the mother. The young woman's breaths come faster now, frantic, shallow, wheezing. The sweat on her brow grows colder. Her fingers twitch as though reaching for something just beyond the edge of the bed. "Stay with me," Miss Briggs murmurs. "Stay a little longer." But fever does not bargain. Within moments, the mother's body goes limp. Another life claimed in the hour that was meant to bring another. Miss Briggs lowers her head, her shoulders shaking with silent grief. She has known loss before too many times, but never like this. Never with death pressing so close on both sides of the bed. She gathers her tools slowly, mechanically. When she reaches the door, she pauses. "I stayed too long," she whispers to herself. Then she steps into the corridor, closing the door behind her, leaving the fever, the silence, and the two still bodies to the night. And the slums, as always, move on. The tavern below is loud, as it always is, even on nights when the slums feel too fragile to bear the weight of laughter. Tankards clatter, chairs scrape, and men shout half-sung melodies that slur into one another like drunken ghosts. The air downstairs is thick with pipe smoke and spilled ale, a haze that swirls around the low ceiling beams like a restless spirit. But above the tavern, on the second floor where the rooms rent for a few pence a week, silence has taken hold. It's a strange, unnatural silence, not the gentle quiet of sleep, but the heavy, stifling quiet of a room holding its breath. The wooden stairs creak each time someone takes a step, but tonight no one climbs upward. Even the regulars, emboldened by drink, avoid the upper rooms. They whisper to one another about the fever moving through the slums, about the Turner family, about the widow, about the mattress burned to blackened bones in the courtyard. They whisper, too, about the young man who moved into the room above the tavern only 5 days ago, a mill worker named Ellis Pike, quiet as a shadow and pale in the lantern light. No one has seen him come downstairs today. No one has heard him walk across the boards, and still, no one goes up to check. Fever has a way of making cowards of everyone. Only the tavern keeper, Mr. Boyd, forces himself up the steps just before closing. He carries a plate with a crust of bread on it, untouched leftovers from the night's stew. His boots echo softly up the staircase, each step slower than the last. He stops outside Ellis's door. The candle in the hallway sputters, casting a thin stripe of light across the floor. Boyd hesitates, then knocks 3 times. "Ellis," he calls. "You all right, lad?" "Nothing." He knocks again, his knuckles trembling just slightly. "Ellis? Supper's here." Still no answer. Boyd's breath grows unsteady. He presses his ear to the door. At first, he hears nothing but the muffled roar of the tavern below, the laughter, the music, the shouts. But beneath it, faintly, almost imagined, comes the softest sound, a groan, barely a thread of voice, barely human. Boyd swallows hard. He tries the doorknob. It turns. Inside, the room is dim, lit only by the dying glow of a candle that has melted into a puddle at the base. The air feels wrong the moment he enters, warm, stale, thick with the smell of illness. A single cot sits against the wall, blankets twisted into a heap. And there, half sitting, half collapsed against the headboard, is Ellis. His hair is plastered to his forehead. His skin shines with sweat. His eyes stare glassily toward the door but do not seem to see it. One hand clutches the blanket, the other trembles against his chest, as though he's trying to hold something inside himself, a failing heart, a desperate breath, a life slipping loose. "Ellis," Boyd whispers. Ellis's lips move, but no words come. His throat works, trying to shape a sound, a plea, a warning. Instead, another groan escapes, thin, desperate. Boyd steps forward, but only once. Fear holds him back. He is not a cruel man. He is not heartless. But he has a wife and 2 daughters sleeping downstairs. He has seen what fever does to families, how quickly it steals the strong, how mercilessly it climbs from one body to another. He stands at a distance. "Ellis," he says again, gentler this time. "I'll fetch the doctor." Ellis tries to shake his head, but the motion is too much. His body folds inward, breath hitching, chest rising in shallow, frantic spasms. Boyd takes another step backward. "I'll come back," he promises, though they both know he won't. He sets the food plate on the floor near the door. It slides slightly, settling against the wall. The tavern roars beneath them, drunken joy, loud and alive, completely unaware that above their heads, a young man fights for air with the last scraps of strength he has. Boyd closes the door gently. The silence swallows the room again. Downstairs, laughter bursts like fireworks. Someone shouts for another pint. A fiddle strikes up a merry tune. And above them, Ellis's breathing grows thin, thinner still, until the music is the last thing he hears. In the slums, joy and death often share the same roof. but they never share the same room. In the early hours before dawn, when the tavern's last embers die and the slums retreat into a brittle, uneasy stillness, a pair of small leather shoes sits by the hearth in the Collins family's room. They are scuffed, worn thin at the toes, and cracked along the sides where the stitching has begun to unravel, but they have been polished carefully, with the kind of tenderness that poverty rarely allows. They sit neatly side by side, waiting for feet that will never fill them again. Maggie Collins is the one who placed them there. She kneels on the floor now, staring at the shoes as though she can will her brother's footsteps back into them. The fire behind her has burned to ash, leaving only the faintest glow, soft, dying, fragile as a breath. It paints the shoes in a warm hue that makes them look almost alive, almost ready to be taken out into the morning light. Almost, but the room is too quiet for that. Her brother, Robbie, lies on the cot beneath 3 thin blankets, his small frame barely lifting the fabric when he breathes. His fever broke sometime in the night, not because he fought his way through it, but because his body finally let go. Now the warmth of the blankets feels wrong, almost mocking, as though they cling to a heat that belongs to something living, not to the stillness beneath them. Their mother sits beside the cot, unmoving. Her hands rest in her lap, fingers interlaced too tightly. She does not cry. Tears require strength she no longer has. Her eyes remain fixed on Robbie's face, waiting for some sign, a twitch of the mouth, a flutter of an eyelid, a shift beneath the blankets. But Robbie will not move again, and Maggie knows it. She presses her forehead to the cold floorboards, fighting the rising ache in her chest. She doesn't make a sound. Her mother has warned her so many times never to wake the neighbors with grief, never to draw attention to their room unless absolutely necessary. But the silence within her grows so painfully large that she feels it might swallow her whole. At last she turns her head toward the hearth. The shoes stare back at her. She remembers how Robbie used to sit cross-legged at the edge of the fire, tapping the soles together to shake out the dust and mud. He always hummed while he worked a tune he made up himself. Sometimes he tapped too hard, and the shoes would clap together in a loud echo that sent their mother shushing him with a tired smile. "You'll wake the whole building," she'd say. Now the whole building sleeps deeply, heavily, swallowed by fever and fear. Nothing wakes it anymore. There is a knock at the door, soft, hesitant. Maggie flinches. Her mother's head lifts slowly. "Maggie?" comes a whisper from the hallway. It's Rowan the runner. His voice is gentle, cautious. Is everything all right?" Her mother does not answer. The silence behind the door is answer enough. Rowan stands there for a long moment, the cold seeping into his bones. He presses his ear to the door, listening. The quiet inside tells him everything. "I'm sorry," he whispers through the wood, his voice barely audible. His footsteps retreat. Back inside, Maggie crawls toward the shoes. She lifts one into her lap, fingers trembling as she traces the cracked leather. She tries to imagine Robbie's laugh echoing through the room again, tries to imagine his footsteps pounding down the hallway, tries to imagine him tugging at her sleeve to show her something exciting he found in the courtyard. But the slums have taken all of that. She places the shoe back beside its twin. For a brief moment, the dawn's grey light slips through the cracks in the window shutter. It lands softly on the small shoes, warming them as if Robbie might slip them on at any moment. Maggie closes her eyes. The shoes remain by the hearth, waiting for feet that will never return. A quiet memorial in a room where grief is learned young, and loss is always close enough to touch. Before the sun rises, the slums already know who will not survive the day. They know by the sound, not by sight, not by touch, not even by whispers traded nervously through cracked doors. They know by the cough. It begins just after dawn, when the fog still lingers low over Bramble Court, and the damp air settles heavy on every roof, tile and windowsill. The slums are used to coughing. It is the soundtrack of poverty, but this sound is different, sharper, deeper, a tearing cough that claws up from the belly and scrapes against the ribs before bursting into the hall like a warning. Everyone hears it. Everyone pretends they don't. The cough belongs to Mr. Fenwick, a former bricklayer whose hands once built half the factories now belching smoke along the river. He lives alone in a top-floor room, a cramped space beneath the slanted roof where rats nest inside the walls and rain seeps through the tiles. His neighbors used to hear him humming to himself each morning as he laced his boots. A gentle tune, a habit from better times. He hasn't hummed in weeks. The fever took his strength first, leaving his arms frail and his chest hollow. Then it took his appetite, then his balance, then his breath. By now, even standing is a battle he can barely endure. But the cough he still has in abundance. It punches through the wallboards like a battering ram, rattling the stairwell and forcing dust to drift from the rafters. Each time it erupts, heads jerk upward, faces tighten, breaths hitch. Even those used to sickness feel the tremor of dread, for when the cough echoes through brick, it means the fever has reached the lungs. It means the line between life and death has thinned to a thread. On the second floor, Mrs. Kettle clamps her hands over her ears, rocking slightly as she whispers prayers. Her own lungs wheeze faintly, as though remembering their own past battles with illness. She fears Mr. Fenwick's cough, not because it is loud, but because it is familiar. Across the hall, Rowan pauses halfway down the stairs, clutching yesterday's bread crust. He swallows hard. The sound reminds him of his mother's cough during the winter fever last year, the one she survived by what many called mercy and others called miracle. He closes his eyes and stands still, listening. Another cough erupts above him, louder, tearing at the cracked plaster. He winces. On the ground floor, the tavern keeper Boyd stops polishing a tankard. The sound travels through the beams, shaking dust from the ceiling. His face pales. He mutters under his breath. Not another one. He isn't heartless. He simply knows what comes next. Rooms above his tavern have emptied too many times this month. In the room next to Fenwick's, a young mother nurses her infant. Each cough makes her flinch, her grip tightening protectively around the child. She presses her ear to her door, debating whether to offer help. But she remembers the Turner family, the fever cart, the mattress burned in the courtyard. Her hand withdraws, trembling from the handle. Mr. Fenwick coughs again. This one ends in a choking rasp that fades into a thin whimper. He leans against the wall, palm pressed flat to steady himself. The boards feel cool beneath his skin, and for a moment he imagines the building breathing with him, inhaling, exhaling, suffering. His chest aches, a molten pain radiating along his ribs, growing with each breath he forces into his lungs. His eyes water, his knees buckle slightly. He knows he should call for help, but pride is a stubborn thing. Bricklayers do not beg, they endure. They carry weight until the body gives out. His body is giving out. He coughs again, a long, shuddering collapse of breath, and something warm spills onto his hand. He doesn't check what it is. He doesn't need to. The sound echoes down the hallway one last time, bouncing off the brick, trembling through the floorboards, slipping under doors like a final message. Then silence. The slums hear it. They feel it. They absorb it into their walls like every other tragedy carved into this place. Children stop playing in the courtyard. Mothers pause at the pump. Even the rats freeze for a moment, whiskers twitching. Everyone knows what follows such silence. Before noon, Rowan sits on the stairs again, hands folded, head bowed. Mrs. Kettle weeps softly in her room. Boyd lights an extra candle behind the bar without explaining why. And on the top floor, beneath the slanted roof, Mr. Fenwick lies still, the morning light crawling slowly across the floor toward him. In the slums, death rarely knocks. Sometimes it simply coughs loud enough for everyone to hear before it takes someone with it. The city morgue was never meant for the poor. Its stone steps were designed for heavier boots, the polished heels of doctors, the crisp soles of inspectors, the careful footfalls of constables carrying out official duties. But over the past month, Those steps have worn down beneath a different kind of crowd. The fever cart rolls up more often now, its wheels carving familiar grooves into the path, and each time it stops, it brings more bodies than the morgue can bear. On this morning, the driver wipes sweat from his brow as he unloads the latest dead. The air is cold, but his breath comes thick and heavy. He has worked through the night, through rooms stinking of fever, through stairways too narrow for the stretcher. His gloves are stained. His coat hangs from him damp with mist and sorrow. Inside, the morgue is dim. Lanterns flicker against stone walls, casting long shadows over rows of tables pushed closer and closer together. What once was a place of solemn quiet now feels cramped, claustrophobic, overwhelmed. Sheets draped over bodies brush against one another. Names written on tags blur from moisture. Some lie on tables, others lie beneath them. The rest lie on the floor. A single coal stove burns in the corner, sending up coils of weak heat. It is meant to fight the damp. It cannot fight the smell. Two attendants stand in the center of the room, their voices hushed and strained. "There's no more space," one murmurs, glancing around as though confessing a crime. "Not for another hour. Not for another day." The other runs a shaking hand through his hair. But the fever cart keeps coming. They fall silent, not because they have nothing more to say, but because the truth is too heavy to speak aloud. At the far end of the room, a doctor pulls back the sheet covering Mrs. Ames. He checks her wrists, though he already knows there is no pulse there. Habit, ritual, a small act of dignity in a place where dignity is a luxury. He sighs, writes her name in the ledger, and closes it with care. The door creaks open again. Another body. A young man, this time Ellis Pike, from the room above the tavern. His face is pale, slack, strangely peaceful, despite the agony of his final breaths. The attendants exchange a brief, knowing look. Him, too. A third table is brought in from a storage room. They squeeze it between two others. Barely enough room to pass between them. The doctor steps back, rubbing his temples. "We can't go on like this," he mutters. But the morgue goes on anyway. It always does. The fever cart returns before the attendants have even finished arranging Ellis's body. A mother stands beside it weeping softly, her hands clasped around a shawl she cannot bring herself to let go of. Her daughter, barely 8 years old, lies wrapped in a linen sheet. Her cheeks are still flushed with the heat of fever, though her body has long gone cold. The mother presses her forehead to the child's still face before the attendants gently guide her back. "I'll come tomorrow," she whispers. "I'll come to see her again," but she won't. There is no room for visits here, no space for mourning, and tomorrow the morgue will already be full again. As evening approaches, the doctor sends word to the parish. We need another room, another building, more tables, more men. But night arrives before the message reaches anyone with power, and by then, 3 more bodies lie waiting under the morgue's thin awning placed there gently, respectfully, because there is nowhere else to put them. The lantern light trembles, the stone walls sweat with condensation, and in the stillness of the morgue, the truth hangs thick in the air. Death has outgrown its rooms. And the slums, stripped of breath and space and mercy, have only begun to feel the weight of what is still coming. Night returns to Bramble Court in a slow crawl, drifting through alleys and stairwells like a tired ghost searching for a place to rest. It settles unevenly across the tenement, dimming the corners, swallowing the doorways, pushing a cold draft through every crack in the plaster. Families retreat indoors, pulling curtains tight, lowering their lantern wicks to save what little oil remains. But in one cramped room on the 4th floor, a single candle burns steady beside a cot, stubborn, unwavering, its flame trembling only when the building itself exhales. The candle belongs to the O'Rourke family. The cot beside it belongs to their eldest daughter, Maeve. She lies beneath a heavy quilt, her thin frame barely denting the straw mattress. Her lips are cracked, her hair sticks to her damp forehead in tangled strands. Fever has placed its hand upon her gently at first, then with a grip that tightened each passing night. Now, her breaths come shallow and fast, each one a quiet plea for the next. The room is warm with her sickness, warm in a way no fire could make it. Her family has not opened their window in days. Her mother, Bridget O'Rourke, sits at her bedside, her hands wrapped around the candle's base. She keeps it steady each time the floorboards creak, as if the slightest flicker might disrupt her daughter's fragile tether to the living. Her eyes are bloodshot, ringed with exhaustion. She has not slept in 2 nights. She cannot. "Stay with me," she whispers over and over, words barely more than an exhale. "Stay just a little longer." Maeve does not answer, but her eyes move beneath their lids. A flicker, a drift, a quiet struggle. Her younger brother, Liam, sits on the stool near the wall, hugging his knees. His small face glows in the candlelight, pale and frightened. He hasn't spoken since sunset, not even when their mother asked him to fetch water from the corner pump. He only shook his head, eyes wide, knowing too well what sickness clings to the pump handle. Even children here understand the price of touching the wrong surface. Down the hall, footsteps echo slow, dragging, heavy. A door shuts softly. Somewhere on the lower floor, a woman sobs briefly before falling silent again. The tenement feels alive, as though it listens, breathes, grieves with its residents. But in the O'Rourke room, all sounds fade beneath the soft rasp of Maeve's breathing. Bridget dips a cloth into the last of their water and dabs her daughter's forehead. The coolness lasts only a second before the heat beneath it pushes back, claiming its territory. The fever is strong, too strong. Bridget knows this, but hope in the slums is stubborn, even reckless. She hums a lullaby, the same one she used to sing when Maeve was small. The melody quivers, but she keeps singing, voice trembling faintly with grief she is unwilling to accept. As she hums, she reaches for Maeve's hand, lacing their fingers together. The girl's skin feels too warm, pulsing with a rhythm that grows weaker each hour. Bridget squeezes gently, as if her grip alone could anchor her daughter to the world. The candle crackles softly. Liam shifts on his stool, hugging himself tighter. "Mama," he whispers finally, barely audible. Is she going to—" "Don't say it." Bridget cuts in sharply, but her voice cracks. She closes her eyes. "Not while she can still hear us." Liam nods, tears gathering but refusing to fall. The hours stretch. The candle burns lower. The room grows even quieter. Every breath Maeve takes seems thinner than the last. Bridget leans closer, her voice soft and trembling. "I'm here, my love. I'm right here." Maeve exhales a long, slow sigh, then another, then nothing. The candle flame steadies, as if holding the moment in place. Bridget waits. 1 second, 2, 3. Her fingers tighten around her daughter's hand. "Maeve?" She breathes. No answer. No rise of the chest. No shudder of breath. Just the warm stillness that only a fever's end can bring. Liam begins to cry, silent tears dropping onto his knees. Bridget lowers her forehead to her daughter's lifeless hand and lets her sobs shake the room. Outside the door, neighbors pause as they pass. They listen. They bow their heads. They move on. The candle beside the cot burns on, its last task now to guard the quiet. Morning arrives reluctantly, as though even the sun hesitates to cast its light across Bramble Court. A thin, sickly glow seeps through the alleyways, revealing puddles left from the night rain, sagging laundry lines, and shuttered windows hiding entire worlds of quiet misery. The slums wear their fatigue openly, brick darkened by damp, doors warped by time, and stairwells bowing under the weight of too many stories of loss. It is on this reluctant morning that a politician arrives. Not the kind who normally walks these streets, not the kind who views the slums only from the window of a passing carriage, remarking with polite disgust to his companions. No, this man, Mr. Alistair Crowden, has chosen to step out of his polished world and into Bramble Court itself. His visit was announced barely an hour before he arrived, giving the parish inspector just enough time to wash his hands and straighten his coat, and giving the slums no time at all to prepare anything resembling dignity. Mr. Crowden appears at the mouth of the alley with 2 assistants and a constable at his back. His boots are made of fine leather, polished until they gleam in the thin morning light, and they are far too clean for this place. His coat is thick wool, tailored and warm, the kind of garment that costs more than a family in these courts earns in 3 months. He carries a handkerchief pressed to his nose, not to shield himself from the cold, but from the air he clearly believes is beneath him. The slum quiets. Faces appear in doorways. Curtains shift. Children freeze beside the pump, their tin buckets half filled. Even the rats pause mid-scurry, whiskers twitching, wary of this unfamiliar presence. Crowden surveys the street with the expression of someone studying a tragic painting, distantly sympathetic, but with no desire to step closer. The inspector clears his throat anxiously. "This is Bramble Court, sir," he says, "one of the worst affected districts." Crowden nods, peering at the peeling plaster and sagging beams, as if assessing unsightly damage in a home he intends to sell. "Yes, unfortunate," he murmurs. "Quite unfortunate indeed." A woman nearby stiffens. She clutches her shawl tighter. Unfortunate is a word the slums have heard too often, a word that excuses inaction while acknowledging suffering just enough to sound humane. Crowden steps forward cautiously, his boots sinking half an inch into the mud. He grimaces. The assistant closest to him fumbles to lay down a handkerchief as a makeshift stepping stone, but Crowden waves him off, straightening his back. "No, let's continue," he says, as though performing an act of saintly sacrifice. They walk deeper into the alley. Someone tries to open a window for air, but then remembers the fever drifting through the buildings and quickly closes it again, heart pounding. A child sneezes. Her mother slaps a hand over her mouth, fearing the politician might look in their direction and decide illness makes them undesirable. The group stops at the Turner door. The chalk mark still lingers faintly, the wood still swollen with heat dried from inside. Crowden angles his head, squinting at it. "Is this one?" "Typhus, sir," the inspector answers quietly. "2 gone. Children surviving. For now." Crowden exhales sharply, not in grief, but in discomfort. "Yes. Well, let us hope they recover." Next, they walk toward the courtyard where the burned mattress still lies in a heap of blackened metal coils. Smoke scent clings stubbornly to the stones below. Crowden stops again, eyes narrowing. "What is this?" "A mattress, sir. Destroyed to contain the fever." He stiffens. "Burned? Here? In public?" "In the slums, sir," the inspector says softly. "There is no private place." "Nocile." Crowden does not respond. His face tightens, his jaw clenches, and for a brief, startling moment, something real flickers across his expression, not pity, not disgust, but shock. He sees the small shoes by the Collins hearth when the door cracks open for a second. He sees the pale silhouette of Maeve O'Rourke beneath a sheet. He sees Rowan, clutching his morning crust, eyes sunken with the weight of stories no child should carry. He sees enough, but only for a moment. The handkerchief rises again to his face. "Well," he says at last, clearing his throat, "I can assure you I will report on the state of this district. Measures will be discussed, provisions considered." The slum does not believe him. It listens with the patience of those who have heard promises buried beneath decades of grime. Crowden nods, turns on his heel, and makes his way back toward the cleaner streets with hurried steps. His boots, once spotless, now bear splashes of slum mud. He will have them scrubbed before noon. And behind him, Bramble Court absorbs the silence he leaves behind, a silence filled with the knowledge that the world has seen them and still walked away. The morning after Mr. Crowden's visit, the parish inspector returns alone, shoulders tight, gaze lowered, walking as though the slums themselves might swallow him whole. He carries a stack of papers under his arm, their corners curled from damp, and tucked between them is something rare in Bramble Court, a map, not of streets or sewers or voting districts, but of sickness. He climbs the stairs slowly, lantern flickering weakly in the stale air. The moment he reaches the second-floor landing, he pauses. He listens. He always listens now for the cough that splits the silence, for the cry that comes from behind a closed door, for the quiet that means something far worse. Only when he hears neither death nor despair in that instant does he move on. Inside his small office, a spare room above the stable, with a warped desk and one cracked window, he spreads the papers before him. The map is hand-drawn, ink smudged from countless corrections. It shows the slum from above, Bramble Court, Sparrow Lane, Dog's Alley, the river path, the broken pumps, the tenements stacked like crumbling teeth. The inspector dips his quill into the inkwell, then he marks the first cross. It goes over the Turner room, a dark X, jagged, thick. He hesitates before moving to the next. The Collins family, a smaller mark, but still dark. The O'Rourke's, another. The mattress burning site in the courtyard, he draws a circle there. The morgue. He shades that in completely. His hand trembles. Not from fear, he has grown used to that, but from the overwhelming truth the map reveals. Each mark bleeds into the next. Each door touched by fever sits pressed dangerously close to a neighbor. The slums were never designed for survival, but now they seem designed for contagion itself. Each family packed so tightly that sickness threads from wall to wall, from floor to floor, like a single breath shared between hundreds. The inspector exhales shakily and wipes his brow with his sleeve. He marks more. The tavern room where Ellis Pike died, coughing into the beams. Mrs. Ames's chamber, already emptied but still radiating remnants of fever. Mr. Fenwick's attic, a dark blot near the corner of the map. The pump, the very heart of the slums, a spider's web of contamination. When he steps back, the map has transformed. What began as scattered points has become something else entirely. A constellation of death, clusters of sickness blooming like bruises. Lines between buildings that never needed to be drawn now appear unmistakable. Invisible paths of infection shaped by shared walls, shared water, shared air. The inspector presses a hand to his mouth, staring at what he has created. This isn't a map, he whispers to himself. It's a sentence. For the first time in weeks, he feels tears sting behind his eyes. He remembers the politician's polished boots and indifferent gaze. He remembers the tidy promise of measures will be discussed. He knows this map will likely sit in a drawer somewhere in the parish hall, unread, untouched, forgotten, but he cannot bring himself to hide it. Not yet. He rolls the paper carefully, tucking it into a leather tube, and leaves the room. When he steps outside, the slums greet him with their familiar misery. Coughing, crying, arguing, singing, living, dying. He walks the length of Bramble Court, glancing at each building he has marked. The people don't notice him at first. They are busy surviving. But a few eventually look up. A mother holding her baby. A factory boy with dust on his face. Old Mrs. Kettle, leaning on her cane. Rowan, barefoot, watching quietly. He meets their eyes one by one. He wants to tell them what the map shows the truth, that sickness has them surrounded, hemmed in, trapped. He wants to warn them of what is coming. But how do you warn someone of a fire when they are already inside the flames? Instead, he nods, slow and solemn. Then he turns toward the parish hall, the map heavy at his side. Behind him, Bramble Court continues its weary struggle against a foe it cannot see, cannot touch, cannot outrun. A foe now drawn plainly in ink, spreading, tightening, unstoppable. And the slums breathe on, unaware of the terrible shape their suffering has taken, on one man's trembling map. Night falls over Bramble Court like a slow descent of ash. The air thickens, the temperature drops, and the shadows stretch into long fingers that slip between broken door frames and cracked windows. Most of the slums retreat indoors at this hour, not for warmth, but for fear. Fever thrives in the dark, and after sunset, no one wants to risk meeting it face to face in the alleys. No one except her. Nurse Evelyn Hale is not a figure the slum children whisper about the way they do with fever carts or inspectors. She is a quieter legend, the kind who walks without fanfare, whose presence is felt before it is seen. Every evening, when the lamps along the river gutters fade to weak embers, she appears at the edge of Bramble Court carrying a single lantern. Its glow cuts through the darkness in a trembling sphere of pale gold. Inside that sphere, she brings something the slums have nearly forgotten: gentleness. Her boots crunch softly against the grit as she steps into the alley, lifting the lantern high enough to illuminate the stone beneath her feet. She wears a wool cloak frayed at the edges and a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck, but the cold still reddens her fingertips. Each night she comes prepared with a satchel of linens, a flask of boiled water, sprigs of willow bark, and tiny vials she's managed to collect through favors, bargains, and overlong shifts at the charity clinic upriver. The slums know her footsteps. Whispers drift from windows as she passes. Is that her? The nurse. She's back again. God bless that woman. Evelyn stops first at the Turner building. A faint warmth still radiates from behind the sweating window pane, sickness pulsing like a heartbeat trapped behind glass. She lifts her lantern and stares for a moment. She knows better than to go inside tonight. The fever there is too hot, the air too heavy. But she pauses long enough to whisper a prayer beneath her breath. "Hold on," she murmurs. "Hold on just a little longer." Then she moves on. Farther down the hall, she stops outside the O'Rourke room. The candle beside Maeve's cot has burned to its final inch. She knocks softly. Bridget O'Rourke answers with eyes swollen from grief. Evelyn doesn't speak. She doesn't offer empty comfort. She simply steps inside, places a clean cloth over Maeve's folded hands, and kneels beside the cot. For several minutes, she stays there in silence, a small act of witness, a final kindness. When she steps back into the hall, her lantern flickers, strained by a draught of cold air carrying the scents of damp wool and cooked cabbage. She pulls her cloak tighter and descends the stairs. At the first landing, Rowan rushes toward her, breathless, clutching his thin jacket around him. "Miss Hale," he whispers. "Mr. Fenwick hasn't moved since morning. It's a breed event." She nods solemnly, though she already suspected as much. "Show me." Rowan leads her up the creaking stairs to the attic room. Evelyn pushes the door open gently. Her lantern sweeps across the slanted ceiling, illuminating a still figure beneath a worn blanket. She approaches slowly, fingertips brushing the man's wrist. Cold, she closes her eyes. For a moment, she sits beside him, lantern glowing softly beside his bed. She adjusts the blanket over his chest and tucks it beneath his chin, as one would for a sleeping child. "Rest now," she whispers. "You've earned it." Down the stairs again, she continues her rounds. At each door, she knocks. At each room, she kneels. At each bedside, she presses her hand to a brow, wipes sweat from a cheek, or offers a single sip of warm water. And though she cannot save them all, though she knows she cannot save even most, she moves through the slums like a thread of light, weaving its way through darkness, too vast to comprehend. Children peek from behind blankets to watch the glow of her lantern pass. Mothers open their doors an inch, meeting her tired smile with one of their own. The old bow their heads when she enters, grateful for a human face in a night otherwise populated by fear. By the time Evelyn reaches the last room of the night, her lantern is dimming, her muscles ache, and her satchel is nearly empty. But she does not falter. She presses on until every door has been touched, every fevered face seen, every frightened family heard. Only then does she lift the lantern one final time and walk back toward the edge of the slums, disappearing into the fog as quietly as she arrived. Behind her, Bramble Court exhales, for even if the fever still burns, tonight the slums were not entirely alone. Morning carries a deceptive calm across the slums, But beyond Bramble Court, in the cleaner, brighter streets of the parish, that calm breaks quickly. The town hall, a proud stone building with tall windows and a clock that chimes too cheerfully for the times, is already humming with anxious voices by the hour of 8. News from the fever-ridden districts has reached the respectable neighborhoods, and panic has a way of traveling faster than truth. Inside the hall, the long oak table is crowded with men in wool coats and crisp collars, aldermen, clerks, physicians, and the parish's more ambitious politicians. The air smells faintly of ink, pipe smoke, and something sharper, fear disguised as authority. The men sit straighter today, papers clutched tighter, voices pitched lower. No one wants to be the one to speak first. The memory of Mr. Crowden's visit to the slums hangs in the room like a damp cloak. At the head of the table, the parish chairman clears his throat. "Well," he begins, folding his hands with forced calm, "the matter before us is the report from Bramble Court." He nods to the inspector standing in the corner, his face drawn and pale. "Let us proceed." The inspector steps forward, removing a leather tube from under his arm. He unrolls the map across the table, the one he drew in his cramped office the day before, the one inked with crosses, circles, and shaded patches that form a frightening pattern of contagion. The men lean in. A gasp escapes someone at the far end. "My God," a physician murmurs. "It's everywhere." The map shows it clearly, a web of infection growing fast, spreading through tenements like fire through dry timber. A cluster at the Turner building, another around the burned mattress, more around the pump, more still near the tavern. Each mark a doorway, each doorway a family, each family a risk. The chairman's jaw tightens. "This is worse than expected." The inspector's voice is quiet. "It's worse than anything I've seen in 15 years. For a long moment, no one speaks. Then the debate erupts, sharp, layered, overlapping voices filling the hall like a rising storm. "We must close the pump. Impossible, it's their only water source. They're contaminating the entire district. We can't turn our backs on them. We cannot afford more bodies in the morgue. We need volunteers to deliver clean supplies." "Who in their right mind would volunteer?" One alderman slams his palm on the table. "Containment is the only option. Seal the buildings." Another turns white. "Seal them? With the sick still inside?" A long, tense silence follows. Even mentioning such an act feels sinful. The chairman stands slowly, fixing his gaze on the map. "We cannot seal them," he says, voice low. "Not yet, but we must prevent spread. We need funds, more nurses, more coal for boiling water, more hands on the fever carts. We need London's approval for any of that." Someone interrupts. "And London will not approve a penny unless the death toll worsens." The words strike the room like a physical blow. No one denies it. Everyone knows how politics works. The inspector, suddenly trembling with anger, steps closer to the table. "Sir, with respect, if we wait for London, we will lose the slums entirely. Every child, every mother, every worker. They're fighting alone." A murmur spreads through the room, uncomfortable and restless. Compassion flickers on some faces, but practicality, or cowardice, sits heavier on most. The chairman rubs his temples. "I will write to the city council, request emergency measures. And in the meantime," the inspector demands. A hush falls. No answer. Because the truth is this: the town hall has no plan, no real remedy, no urgency that matches the suffering now mapped in ink across the table. After several more useless exchanges, the meeting dissolves into mutters and nods, the men gathering their coats and papers with stiff, uneasy movements. The map remains unrolled on the table, its marks bleeding together under the lantern light. As the inspector leaves the hall, his shoulders sag. He knows the truth in his bones. Help will not arrive in time. He steps outside into the cold, the wind whipping at his coat, carrying with it distant echoes of Bramble Court coughs, cries, whispered prayers. Behind him, the town hall doors shut with a heavy thud, and the slums, waiting for salvation, will learn yet again that decisions made in bright rooms rarely reach the darkest ones. The fire starts before dawn, not the kind that warms hands or softens hard bread, but the kind that arrives out of necessity, grim and quiet, like an unwanted visitor. Bramble Court wakes to the smell before the light, a bitter sting in the throat, a haze that settles low over the cobblestones, smoke crawling like a wounded animal between the doorways. At first, no one moves. In the slums, the smell of smoke is as common as coughing, and not every fire is cause for alarm. A cooking pot overturned, a faulty chimney, a lantern kicked over by a restless sleeper. These small flames are part of daily life. But this smoke is different, heavier, darker, clinging to the air with a stubborn urgency that forces even the most exhausted residents to lift their heads. Mrs. Kettle is the first to open her door. She stands in her threshold, shawl wrapped tight around her brittle shoulders, eyes narrowing as she peers down the stairwell. The smoke drifts upward in thick curls. It's coming from the courtyard. She presses a hand to her mouth and coughs weakly, her breath wheezing in and out. For a moment, she considers retreating back inside, but curiosity is stronger than caution. By the time she reaches the landing, other doors open, one by one. Faces appear, pale and wary. Rowan steps into the hall barefoot, blinking through the haze. Maggie Collins clutches her mother's skirt. Someone calls down, "What is it? Who's burning?" No one answers. They file slowly down the stairs in a procession of fear and curiosity, until they spill out into the courtyard, a place that has known too many fires these past weeks. And there, near the pump, flames lick at the edges of a heap so large the slum seems to recoil around it. Blankets, clothing, sheets, pillows, straw stuffings spilling out like entrails, and mattresses, several of them, each soaked in fever, each dragged out from a room that has already lost someone. A labourer from the parish, the same man who hauled bodies to the morgue, stands beside the fire with a long iron hook feeding the pile. His face is streaked with soot, his eyes glassy from exhaustion. He says nothing as he works. He simply hooks another blanket and tosses it onto the blaze. A sheet with faint bloodstains, a coverlet with a child's embroidered initials, a pillow flattened by countless restless nights. Each one catches fire with a hiss, curling inward, devoured within seconds. Bridget O'Rourke arrives last, still pale with grief. She stares as Maeve's quilt, the one sewn by her grandmother, patched over and over, and warmed by her daughter's fevered body, is laid upon the flames. Bridget doesn't cry. She simply watches, face tight, fists clenched, as the quilt blackens and collapses into ash. Someone whispers, "It's safer this way." Someone else answers, "It doesn't feel safer." The heat rises in waves, too hot even at a distance. The fire casts long, distorted shadows across the walls, twisting the slum into a place of smoke and trembling light. Children cling to their mothers. Men shift their weight uneasily, unsure whether to help or to flee. The smell of burning wool and sickness fills the air, burrowing into their clothes, their lungs, their memories. The labourer coughs hard and doubles over for a moment, bracing a hand against his knee. When he straightens, he wipes his mouth with the back of his glove, leaving a streak of soot across his cheek. His voice, when it comes, is rough. "Orders from the parish," he mutters. "Too many sick beds. Too much spread. They said burn anything that's touched fever." "Everything?" Rowan asks in a small voice. The man nods. "Everything." A murmur ripples through the crowd. What about the rooms? What about the clothes still inside? What about those who still sleep on the floor? What happens now? No one answers. Not even the labourer. The fire roars higher. Sparks rise into the air like fleeting stars. They cling briefly to the fog before disappearing. The slums stand in a sombre circle, watching the last traces of their belongings, their comfort, their history, their dead reduced to smoke. The smoke hangs heavy above the court, refusing to rise, refusing to leave. It settles on shoulders, on windowsills, on breath. It seeps into the cracks of the tenement walls. It finds its way up stairwells and under doors, whispering reminders of what was lost. As the flames die down and the pile collapses into a glowing bed of embers, the crowd disperses. They return to their rooms, their coughs, their fears, leaving the courtyard dim and empty except for the soft crackle of dying fire. And long after the last person has gone inside, the smoke remains, a shroud over Bramble Court, a warning of everything the fever has already claimed, and everything it still intends to take. The night after the great burning, Bramble Court falls into a silence so taut it feels like the entire slum is holding its breath. The smoke has settled into the walls, into the clothes drying on lines, into the very air, a sour reminder of what has been lost and what still lingers unseen. Even the wind seems reluctant to move through the courtyard, dragging slowly, as though burdened by everything it must carry. Inside the Turner building, the quiet is broken by a faint scratching. It begins under the floorboards, soft, swift, nervous, then it grows louder, more deliberate, the sound of claws scraping wood, of something searching, sniffing, learning the shape of the darkness. A single rat emerges from a narrow crack near the corner of the Collins family's old room. Its fur is patchy. Its tail drags like a limp rope. Its nose twitches rapidly, catching scents both familiar and foreboding. Maggie Collins sees it first. She sits beside the hearth, her small body curled into itself, her forehead resting on her knees. The shoes she'd placed there, Robbie's shoes, remain untouched, gathering a thin veil of dust. She lifts her head slowly when she hears the sound and watches the rat emerge. It pauses in the middle of the floor, glancing at her with dark, bead-like eyes that gleam in the candlelight. She doesn't scream. She doesn't move. In the slums, rats are not visitors, they are neighbors. The rat sniffs the shoes, sniffs the hearth, sniffs the blankets folded neatly on the floor. Then it turns and scurries into the hallway, its small feet tapping against the boards. Maggie rises quietly, curiosity tugging at her feet. She opens her door just enough to slip through. The hallway is dim, lit only by the faint glow of lanterns leaking under closed doors. The rat moves swiftly ahead, darting toward the stairs. Its body is thin, clearly hungry, but its movements are confident. This is its world, far more than it is any human's. On the second landing, the rat stops abruptly. Rowan stands there, bowl in hand, preparing to bring a piece of crust to his mother's bedside. He is pale, exhausted, eyes too old for a boy his age. When he sees Maggie, he opens his mouth to ask why she's awake. Then he sees the rat. For a moment, none of them move. Then Rowan whispers, "Don't go near it." He knows something she doesn't. He knows the rat has walked through fevered rooms. He knows its fur has brushed against blankets burned in the courtyard. He knows its body carries fleas, and its fleas carry sickness. But before either child can react, the rat slips through the door of Mr. Fenwick's old attic stairwell. Rowan feels his stomach tighten, not because of the rat itself, but because the door should not have been open. He looks at Maggie. Maggie looks at him. Together, silently, they follow. The stairwell smells different than it did yesterday, heavier, sharper, sweeter, in the way rotting fruit smells sweet before it collapses into mush. The air grows warmer as they climb, as though the fever has settled into the wood. When they reach the top, the door to Mr. Fenwick's attic is cracked open, letting out a breath of air that feels wrong on their skin. The rat pushes through first. It darts across the floorboards, over the spot where Mr. Fenwick's body had rested before the cart came. The children stand in the doorway, frozen, staring into the dim room. Someone has been here since the removal. Someone has rifled through Mr. Fenwick's things, drawers half open, blankets tossed aside, a boot lying overturned on the floor. Maggie steps back. Rowan's breath catches. They both know what this means. Someone desperate, cold, hungry, has rummaged through the belongings of a man who died of fever. And now a rat scurries through the mess, its fleas lifting from its body in small, invisible leaps. Maggie feels a chill crawl up her spine. Rowan grips her sleeve. "We need to go," he whispers, voice thin. As they turn to leave, the rat darts past them, disappearing down the stairs, carrying disease where children sleep and mothers pray, and blankets warm the already weakened. Neither child speaks on the way back to their rooms, but both of them understand something new, something terrifying. The fever travelling through Bramble Court is no longer bound to rooms, or beds, or bodies. It has learned to walk, and it has learned to hide in the smallest, quietest places. A rat crossing the floor is no longer just a rat. It is a warning. The wind arrives before sunrise, not the usual thin draft that slips through the cracks in Bramble Court, but a stronger, colder gust that shakes loose the soot from chimney tops and rattles every broken window pane in the tenement. It sweeps through the narrow alleys with strange urgency, as if it carries messages from somewhere far beyond the slums, somewhere untouched by fever, smoke, and grief. But the slums do not welcome the wind, not tonight. On washing lines stretched between windows, the last of the laundry still hangs. Thin shirts, worn skirts, a pair of trousers patched too many times, a few scraps of children's cloth that serve more as memory than garment, and sheets, so many sheets washed in boiling water until the fabric frayed, hung up in the faint hope that the sun might cleanse what fever had left behind. The wind tears through them without mercy. It sends the sheets snapping, twisting, tugging, until cloth rips free from its wooden pins. The first sheet, a large one, greyed from countless washings, detaches from the turner line and spirals upward, caught like a ghost rising from the alley floor. Maggie Collins watches through her small window, eyes wide, hands pressed to the cold glass. For a moment, she thinks she sees the shape of her brother Robbie's outline folding across the fabric as it billows. Then the wind twists, snapping the illusion. The sheet rises higher, catching the weak morning light, floating across the courtyard before drifting downward like a pale shroud. It settles at the foot of the pump, the one the inspector warned them about, the one that carried fever through half the court. Downstairs, Rowan steps out into the yard with a pail in hand. He pauses when he sees the fallen sheet. The wind lifts one corner, revealing faint stains along the edge, stains that look harmless now, dry and softened by time, but which still make his stomach twist. He kneels, unsure if he should pick it up or leave it for the burning heap. His fingers hover inches above the cloth when a second gust sweeps into the courtyard, colder and angrier than the first. It sends the sheet tumbling toward him. Rowan stumbles back, startled. Up on the third floor, Mrs. Kettle leans out from her window, knuckles white on the sill. "Leave it," she calls down, voice raw. "Don't touch it, boy." Her urgency startles the other residents. Doors open, curtains lift, faces appear in shadows. "It's clean," Rowan calls back, though he isn't sure. "No sheet that's hung in this court is clean," Mrs. Kettle says, breath trembling. "Not anymore." Before Rowan can respond, another sheet rips loose, this one smaller, patterned faintly with faded blue flowers. It belongs to the O'Rourkes, and as it flutters free, Bridget O'Rourke rushes to her window, hands flying to her mouth. That sheet had belonged to Maeve. She had washed it the night before her fever broke. She had folded it carefully, as though preparing for a miracle that never came. "Mama?" Liam asks behind her, tugging weakly at her sleeve. Bridget stares down at the sheet as the wind sends it spinning into the street, trailing behind it a softness that feels strangely cruel. Near the tavern, a group of men step out with tankards still in hand, squinting at the sight of fabric floating like ghosts through their alley. "What's all this?" one mutters, swatting at a sheet that lands against his legs. "Laundry taking flight now? It's the fever wind." someone whispers behind him. The phrase spreads faster than the wind itself. Fever wind, a wind that steals sheets from the windows of the sick, a wind that lifts cloth carrying whispers of disease, a wind that does not care where it drops them. The slums grow restless. People rush into the courtyard, not out of courage but out of fear, fear that the sheets will land on doorsteps, on blankets, on children. Rowan sees the panic rising and grabs the sheet closest to him, gripping one clean corner between two fingers. He carries it toward the fire pit, his breath shaking. Maggie appears beside him, silent, clutching another sheet. Her hands tremble, but she does not let go. Others watch from a distance, too afraid to help, too afraid not to. Rowan looks at Maggie. Maggie looks at the flames. Together, they step closer. One by one, they cast the wind-stolen sheets into the fire. The flames seize them hungrily. Fabric shrivels. Stains vanish. Smoke rises. The courtyard grows still. When the last sheet turns to ash, Rowan steps back, eyes on the sky. The wind continues its slow crawl over Bramble Court, no longer tugging at fabric, now only stirring the smoke of the fire. And in the slums, a truth settles into every heart. Tonight, even the laundry learn to flee. And tomorrow, the fever may learn something new. For weeks, the slums have seen the doctor move through their alleys like a mute apparition, a man wrapped in a thick wool coat, carrying a black bag heavy with powders and promises. He has visited the Turner room, the Collins room, the O'Rourke room. He has listened to chests rattling with fever, pressed fingers against cold wrists, and murmured polite phrases of reassurance that meant less with each passing day. But today, Dr. Nathaniel Graves walks differently. He does not hide behind his collar. He does not avert his gaze. He does not pretend. For the first time since the fever took hold, he speaks plainly. The slums notice at once. It's impossible not to. He arrives in Bramble Court just after noon, when the weak sun attempts to warm the stones but fails. Children have retreated indoors. Men linger near the tavern for warmth. Women stand at doorways, wringing cloths that will not stay clean for long. The air tastes of boiled water, and smoke the remnants of the great burning still hanging beneath every eave. Dr. Graves stops near the pump. He removes his hat. A rare gesture. Necessary. The inspector stands beside him, holding the rolled map, the one inked with tragedy. Rowan watches from the stairwell. Bridget O'Rourke leans on the railing above, face hollow with exhaustion. Maggie clings to the edge of her mother's shawl. Others gather slowly, drawn by something in the doctor's stance, something grave and unguarded. Dr. Graves clears his throat, and the slums fall silent. No medicines will stop this fever, he says. The words hit the slums like a blow. Mrs. Kettle gasps softly. A man near the tavern mutters a curse and sinks against the wall. A young mother presses her sleeping child closer to her chest. Dr. Graves lifts his eyes, voice steady but strained. I have done all I can. You must hear the truth now, not what you wish to hear, but what may save you. He opens his satchel and sets it down. For the first time, the slums see its emptiness, only a few vials, a few scraps of linen, nothing more. Whatever remedies once lived inside have been used, exhausted, or rendered useless. This fever does not break with powders, he continues, nor with the tinctures I have prescribed. It thrives in close walls, in damp rooms, in unwashed cloth, in fleas, in filth, in fear. He pauses, scanning the faces before him. It thrives here. The crowd shifts uneasily, but no one interrupts. You must boil everything, he says. Water, cloth, bedding, anything that enters your home. Open your windows when you can. Burn what cannot be cleaned. Bridget O'Rourke steps forward, voice brittle. And what of those already sick? The doctor swallows. He cannot lie to her. Not now. Some will survive, he says quietly. Some will not. But if you do nothing, if the slums continue as they are, if rooms remain closed, bedding remains shared, and fear keeps you clustered together, then none of you will survive what is coming. The words tremble in the cold air. Too heavy to lift away. Maggie clutches her mother's skirt tighter. Rowan lowers his head. And London? Someone calls. What have they said? Dr. Graves closes his eyes, just for a heartbeat. Nothing useful, he answers. The murmur rises. Anger, grief, resignation, all woven together. The doctor lifts a hand. There is one thing you can do, he says. One thing that has helped in other districts. The slums lean in. Choose 1 or 2 people in each building who are strong enough to care for the sick. The rest of you must stay separate from those infected. Do not share blankets. Do not share pillows. Do not share a bed, not even with family. A gasp, sharp, pained ripples through the crowd. But that, a woman stammers. That means, yes, the doctor says, voice dropping. It means letting the fevered rooms become fevered rooms, and letting the others remain untainted. He does not say the word sacrifice. He does not need to. The slums understand. Insulation, separation, walls between sickness and survival, even if those walls are made of goodbye. A child begins to cry. Maggie covers her ears. Rowan feels something inside him twist. Dr. Graves softens. I will help you, he says. I will return every night. I will tend to those who fall ill. But you must help yourselves too. The inspector places a hand on the doctor's shoulder. A rare gesture of solidarity. Slowly, painfully, Bramble Court nods. Not in agreement, but in acceptance. Because plain truth, no matter how cruel, is still better than false hope. Dr. Graves picks up his empty satchel. I will return at dusk, he promises. And as he walks away, the slums remain gathered around the pump, standing in stunned silence. Not because the doctor abandoned them, but because, for the first time since the fever came, someone finally told them the truth. The slums can still survive, but not without letting something and someone go. Night slips back into Bramble Court like a shadow remembering its way home. The slums are exhausted not just in body, but in spirit. The day has stretched them thin, the sheets that flew like ghosts. The burning heap, the doctor's brutal honesty. Every corner of the tenement feels scraped clean of hope. By dusk, the air grows colder, sharp enough to sting the fingertips. The smoke from the morning's fires still clings to the walls, seeping from cracks like breath held too long. People move slowly through the corridors, whispering instructions Dr. Graves gave them, trying to sort out who will sleep where, who will tend the sick, who will be barred from touching anyone at all. The tension is so thick, it seems to bend the very air. But no one is prepared for what happens next. The lamps go out, all at once, every single one. The sudden darkness hits like a blow. At first, everyone freezes, unsure if they imagined it, unsure if the wind simply snuffed a few flames. But then the realization spreads. The entire building has gone dark. Every hallway, every stairwell, every room where a candle wasn't lit. A murmur rolls through the slums. Is it the wind? No, it can't be. Someone check the oil. Why is it so dark? Fear moves with startling speed. In Bramble Court, darkness is not just the absence of light. It is danger. It is blindness. It is the terrible awareness that fever can spread unnoticed in the shadows. Ellen Harrow, widowed just one night before, clutches her son Jonah close. She hears the slamming of a distant door or maybe a bucket dropped near the pump and nearly cries out. Her hands tremble. The dark feels too alive. Up on the 3rd floor, Maggie Collins clings to the edge of her blanket, Robbie's shoes still beside the hearth. Her mother lights a candle immediately, shielding the flame with both hands, as though protecting a newborn. The tiny circle of light pushes back the dark, barely an arm's length, but it is enough for Maggie to breathe again. On the stairwell, Rowan stops mid-step. He had been bringing a cup of broth to his mother's bedside. Now, the darkness feels like a wall he cannot pass through. He turns slowly, squinting into the pitch-black hallway. Then he hears it, a cough, not far away, not faint, not harmless, a deep, wet cough that shakes the very air. Rowan presses himself against the railing, breath held tight. That cough is from a room where the fever has already been declared, a room Dr. Graves told them must remain closed. The darkness swallows the sound again. Rowan retreats, palms sweating. Downstairs, the tavern population spills into the courtyard, men holding candles that flicker wildly in the wind. Their faces are pale, drawn tight with irritation and fear. "What's happened to the lamps?" one demands. "Oil must be out," another mutters. Or, "The line's broken." But a third man, older, sober for once, shakes his head slowly. "No," he says. "This is not an accident." The wind lifts suddenly, tossing the smoke upward. In its swirl, the shadows shift in strange patterns, long, stretched, twisting. The courtyard feels colder than it has in weeks. Mrs. Kettle emerges from her room leaning heavily on her cane. She raises her candle, illuminating the wrinkled worry on her face. "It's the fever," she says softly. "It wants the dark. It always has." Her words send a chill through those gathered, because somewhere deep inside, even the rational ones know. The fever always spreads most when the light is low. Inside the Turner room, the air grows thick again. Inside the Collins room, Maggie squeezes her eyes shut. Inside the tavern loft, the embers flicker uncertainly. Inside every room touched by fever, shadows cling to corners like living things. And downstairs, the inspector emerges from his temporary office. He holds a lantern, the only bright flame left in the slums. His voice trembles as he calls out, "Listen to me, stay in your rooms, stay apart, do not wander, do not gather. We will restore the lamps shortly." But even he does not believe his own words. The darkness presses in too tightly. The wind rattles the windows again, and the slums, huddled in their fractured pockets of candlelight, understand something terrible. Tonight, the fever has found its moment. Tonight, the lamps have fallen silent. Tonight, Bramble Court is truly blind, and something moves freely in the dark. Dawn arrives late to Bramble Court, as if hesitant to step into a place that has already been stripped bare by darkness. The sun edges upward behind a wall of grey clouds, casting a weak, lifeless glow that barely touches the rooftops. It is not warm, it is not hopeful. It is simply there, a reminder that night has passed, though nothing else has changed. One by one, doors crack open, not fully, not bravely, just an inch, enough for tired eyes to peer out and make sure the world still exists. The lamps along the alley remain cold. Their glass is slick with condensation. The wick inside each one lies dark and stiff. Someone whispers that the wind must have blown them out. Someone else mutters that it was no natural wind at all. The truth hangs somewhere in between, heavy, unspoken, watching. On the ground floor, Ellen Harrow steps out first. She holds Jonah's hand, though her own trembles more than his. Her face is drawn tight from sleeplessness. She stares at the darkened lamps with a mix of suspicion and resignation. "They'll fix them today," she murmurs. But Jonah isn't listening. He's staring at the soot-streaked courtyard, where yesterday's fire burned the bedding of the dead. The ash is still there, a thin layer clinging to the stones like frost. Up on the second floor, Rowan emerges, cup in hand, exhaustion etched into the curve of his shoulders. He glances down the stairwell, half expecting to hear Mr. Fenwick's cough echoing through the boards again. But the silence is thick, too thick. It clings to the walls like sickness itself. He steps slowly into the courtyard, rubbing his arms against the cold. Across from him, Maggie Collins slips out with her mother. Robbie's shoes no longer sit by the hearth. Maggie moved them quietly before dawn, tucking them into a corner under her cot, where she can still see them but no one else can. She keeps her head down now, gripping her mother's shawl with one hand, while the other presses a folded scrap of cloth to her nose, the smell of smoke still too sharp. Neighbors gather in hesitant clusters. "What happened to the lamps?" My candle burned itself low, but the lamp never came back. I heard someone moving in the hall last night. Everyone heard something. Mrs. Kettle arrives last, leaning heavily on her cane. She looks at the others, then up at the blank sky. It wasn't the wind, she says softly. No one asks her to explain. In Bramble Court, fear explains itself. A few minutes later, the inspector appears. He walks stiffly, lantern in hand, coat pulled tight against the cold. His face is drawn, his eyes ringed with dark circles. He clears his throat, a small sound swallowed quickly by the courtyard. "The lamps will be repaired today," he says, but his voice trembles. "And Dr. Graves will arrive at noon. He has new instructions." The slums stiffen. New instructions never bring comfort. The inspector surveys the group, the mothers, the barefoot children, the exhausted men leaning against the walls, and for a moment his facade breaks. He looks like someone who hasn't slept in days, who carries too much truth and too little hope. "We lost 2 more in the night," he adds quietly. Heads bow, some gasp, some simply close their eyes. Before anyone can ask who died, footsteps echo from the far end of the alley. Nurse Evelyn Hale approaches, lantern swinging gently at her side, cloak pulled against the cold. She moves quickly, urgently, her boots splashing through shallow puddles. "2?" she asks the inspector softly. He nods once. Her jaw tightens, and she turns toward the stairwell, already climbing. Without being told, the slums know where she's going. Death leaves a kind of silence in its wake, a silence Nurse Hale walks toward instinctively. When she disappears upstairs, the courtyard falls quiet again. A single gust of wind blows through, stirring the ashes of the burned bedding. The grey powder lifts briefly into the air, swirling between the residents before settling again. The dawn light tries to brighten the court, but the slums feel no safer, because today is different. The fever is no longer the only thing they fear. Something moved in the darkness last night. Something they heard, something they sensed, something they still don't fully understand. Dawn has come, but comfort has not.